Hello, this is Geoffrey, and I'm here with DimensionX from PersonalityCafe.
Yep.
Um, we were just talking about uh, getting a what do you call it fix on a personality type from an outside source, I guess. And
Yep.
I told my story online already, which essentially had to do with I actually got it from a therapist, so that was sort of leading me in that direction. And you kind of have had a similar experience where somebody from the outside, certified, in your case,
Yep.
sort of gave you some feedback. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's more just an acquaintance, and the guy's certified, and he said that he had pretty much screaming INFP, sorry, INFJ, sorry.
Okay,
So so yeah, I didn't suggest to him what type I was. In fact, I made it more difficult for him, being evasive with specific questions that seemed like he was trying to point to a certain function type.
sure. Okay, yeah.
Although I suppose that might have narrowed me down even more, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sometimes no matter what we do, those actions sort of help that other person anyway detect where
Yeah,
that.
I think like 30 words in, he was like N
Yeah.
or less than that, so I can't really hide that one. And
Right.
but, but yeah, the I mean, it was kind of a toss up between like four different types rather, which is INFP, INFJ, INTP, and INTJ.
Okay.
Um, INFPs tended to think that I was an INTJ. INTPs, they were like weren't sure, but they thought I was more F like.
Okay.
But the trouble is, because of my field, which is computers, I more associate with
Right.
thinker types or rationals, and I kind of converse in that kind of manner.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's the interesting thing about having that tertiary TI and INFJ is that it does allow us to operate, fairly comfortably, and regularly in that sort of logic-driven area.
Hmm.
But we do starve ourselves when we cut out FE, when we cut out, the socializing with the feelers. I think. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of INFPs, and I tend to like actually talking to them. They're pleasures to be around,
yeah.
really. And same with INTPs. It's just, it's only certain aspects that it's good to converse with them with. Like INTPs, they don't seem to have, well, they do have their morals, but pretty much any conversational topic is fine.
Right.
In fact, the more morally wrong it is, the more they seem to get off in it. It's pretty funny. INFPs, you kind of need to walk the line a bit morally,
Sure.
which is fine as well. But but yeah, there seem to be there's like definitely zones where you shouldn't really cross into,
Right.
which is pretty funny. And INTJ is, um, yeah, I'm not really sure where that one kind of came from. I think it's because I seemed quite rational and clinical when I'm breaking down something like an idea or whatever to make it more feasible.
Right.
And I'm quite strategic, I think, and tactical. So I guess they took it from the stereotype of INTJs.
Okay. You mean you feel like it was that way inside and outside of the workplace, or only in the workplace?
Actually, in the workplace, I am more reactive, so I don't tend to think as much, which is ridiculous. And I more just respond to what's going on,
Okay.
um, and I'm very much problem solving orientated in a workplace. Definitely, like anything goes wrong, go solve it. Always looking for the problem, um, and it's more to help other people.
Right.
That's where I tend to get distracted in the workplace. Is something goes wrong with the person, I try to help them out. Um, like at home, it's more I adopt the conversational style and more of the mindset of the person I'm talking to.
Okay.
I've noticed my use of language tends to change, and it tends to reflect the person I'm talking to
Sure.
as well. And I think that's so it's easier for the other person to assimilate and easier to converse. And
Yeah, well, I
So
agree.
it tends to help communication across.
I do the same thing. I think that's FE if I had to, point to a function.
Yeah, that makes
Whereas INFPs tend not to like to do that quite as much. It's still, overgeneralizing because there's a lot of, at least as far as observing people, there's a lot of sort of similarity between INFP and INFJ, but when it comes to how we think, that's really where the the differences come up.
not to say that INFPs don't think.
No, 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 no. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. In fact,
Don't want you
INFPs.
to become public enemy number one.
Right, right. No, I think that it's the. I mean, INFPs can be very analytical. It's not that. What I'm saying is, for instance, we. It sounds like we're both sort of okay with talking in the other person's language, so to speak,
Yeah.
making it so if I know that somebody's an NT, I sort of try to take my idea and put it into language that I think will get across to them better. I think an INFP is more
It's
likely
to
to
be
say
point, isn't it? And more reasonable.
right.
And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean it just has to make sense and it has to be more defined
Yes.
and more to the point. Whereas INFPs, you structure your word usage in accordance to the emotional weight of each word because they're very good at picking that up. I find
Yes.
because
And it's
aren't they? So I mean they're very good at taking in the information and um, and they're definitely people like feeling or people orientated.
right.
So it seems to be something that they're quite sensitive to and they can pick up on
Well,
a lot easier.
they're so value oriented. They want to know, why is it important to you? That's why I think, as far as changing communication styles, INFPs tend not to do that. They tend to speak to other people the way they would speak to an NT is the same they would speak to SP, SJ, doesn't matter, NF.
True. Well, they are who they are, aren't they?
Right,
They're a very genuine type.
right,
No matter what their morals are, they will stick to them, and they will keep. They'll either, converse normally, or they'll start to just kind of not really participate in discussion, depending on if if it goes along with their morals or if it doesn't,
right,
or their idea of something.
right.
So, I mean, that's very different to myself in the regards of I would just the morals wouldn't really come into play. It's more just about getting along with that person
Right,
and
exactly.
having to make that more constructive, I
Right,
guess. So that's where I struggle because my my own interests don't really come first in that kind of regard. I don't really I don't really go reclusive or non-responsive when things don't go along to my values. I'm not even thinking about that.
right,
I'm more thinking about the other person, what they're thinking, how they're feeling. You know, kind of listening to the conversation and think, what's happened previously in that person for them to kind of establish, like, what's the story behind that person.
right, right.
I think is more what I'm focused on. So I tend to ask questions that kind of reveal that more than anything else.
Right. Trying to get behind whatever they're presenting us, the facade that they're presenting us. Yeah. I mean, I think where I get into trouble, same as you, is if I don't check in with myself often enough, I do just get caught up in what's happening. So I've sort of learned that I have to sort of push more than I do to make sure that my interests are being met. So it sort of sounds like you're struggling with the same issue.
Yeah, I usually find it's better to establish what I want before going in,
Yeah,
so I don't
yeah,
automatically go in like discovery mode with the conversation with other
right,
people. So I actually have a point going in.
right,
Because otherwise I'll just like want to find everything out about the other person.
right,
That will always take priority. So I know what their insecurities are, what stresses them out, what they really want, that kind of stuff. That's really interesting to me. I like helping them kind of achieve that in a way, and or maybe if they're stressed about a certain thing, I'd like to talk it out with them, and that kind of stuff, and that might not be even the reason for me starting the conversation with them.
Right.
I might have like I might need to actually do something else, and I'll see that they're stressed, and then that will be the focus. It'll be like, oh, how can I help this person now?
Right.
Is it calm down a little bit, so I make jokes or whatever, and it will go from there. And then, the conversation will finish. I'll go away and I'll go, damn it,
Right.
that's not what I went there for at all.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that whole getting sort of caught up in creating harmony, and I think for INFJs, it's more than just harmony as far as everybody getting along and chatting. We want everybody to feel good, which we really can't control, but we do try to, get in there and help people feel good if we can. So we could definitely get carried away with that. I know I can get carried away with it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, INFJs seem to have a problem with conflict. It's like such an aversion to the point where it creates conflict.
Yeah.
Or it can do, rather.
Um,
Which is ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah. Because I think because of the ways we try to handle conflict.
I think it's kind of the tunnel vision
Yeah.
of conversation. You dissolve one problem, but then there's another one from a completely different angle. It's like, damn it, okay, well, I need to take this one and this one. So you then solve it enough for both of them to be happy, and then there's a third one. It's like, God, you
Right.
can't really do it. Like
Right.
juggling plates.
Right.
Juggling plates? Balancing plates.
Balance. Yeah. Exactly. Well, and even more than that, it's like the sticks that the plates are rotating on are sort of connected with invisible thread. As soon as when you try to balance one, you actually are pulling over another one.
Yeah, that's why I think I have more of a segmented approach when I'm talking to people. Like I'll have through school I had groups of friends that I would talk to, but those groups would never mix.
Okay.
So I would be friends with people that were into computers, and then some that I was started going to class originally with, and then others for another reason, and I'd be friends with all of them, but I knew they'd never be able to interact because their points of view were so different, and what they perceived as strengths and weaknesses were completely different as well.
Right. Yeah, I think the same thing even when it comes to interacting with my family, because I have to act so different around them. I know that if there's no mixing between family and friends for me, because my friends, I interact so much differently with my friends than I do with my family, that they always, there's no way I could ever have that kind of relationship where there's some kind
There's
of
also
mixing.
what is acceptable and what isn't with your friends
Right.
will conflict with what's acceptable and what isn't, in terms of how you act and react,
Right.
and it will be unusual for them because they're not used to you being like that,
Right.
with your friends or with your family. So it's one of those things you just got to keep it all separate.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I don't know if it's disturbing to them to to see that you do act different around other people. I know I've actually had that response from some people in my life where they're like, I want you to act that way with me, and it's like it doesn't work that way. It's sort of the interaction pattern depends on who the other person is.
It's adapted to suit that other person or
exactly.
that social group. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's very true. I mean, it's the same with me. It's just you just adapt, don't you? It's not that you're not genuine, because you'll find that like you'll always remember you. I mean, you're always you, regardless of what you do.
Right.
And like with people, I've just said that I may interact differently with other people. Obviously, I didn't say it like this because it sounds clinical, but I may seem quite different. But just always know that I'll always be quite reliable, not very, but quite reliable,
Right.
and a very trustworthy person. And I would never mean harm in any kind of way.
Right.
So as long as you know that, regardless, you're pretty much set with me. So
Right.
it's just that kind of way about it. But I mean, I can understand how if someone gets to know you and they get an idea of the person that you are, and then all of a sudden you're acting completely differently with another person,
Right.
and you're like, for example, if I was friends with an INFP, go back to the previous examples. If I was friends with an INFP and then an NT showed up, and then I'd be talking about things with the NT which would be considered very immoral,
Hmm.
but obviously we don't mean it genuinely, it's just joking about, but that might surprise or shock the INFP person because that might be against their morals and it was unexpected.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's right. I think it's our we have a different idea of sort of what integrity or authenticity or genuineness is, which is I think we're all looking for consistency in something. I think for INFJs we're looking for consistency in intention. For others,
That's, yeah, very
yeah,
much true,
I think
because you're looking at the base of drives, aren't you, and
right,
like the underlining idea and sense of the person,
right,
who they genuinely are.
right,
So you're looking
exactly,
at the base of building blocks instead of the facade that people portray. And it's
exactly,
like you automatically know that there's going to be a facade just
right,
going in. You always have the initial layer, which is the smile and greet
right,
kind of shell,
right,
and then you try and bond on interests or whatever, and then you kind of get a bit deeper, and it's more of what drives the person,
right,
and you get a better understanding, and it's more of looking for. I would say like long-lasting friends. Like if you know a person like deep down, it doesn't matter how much time passes. You'll always be friends with that person. You already,
right,
you know them to that kind of level. It's not like flitting from one friendship to the next kind of thing.
right, right, and that I mean
But
that's
you still need to be able to do that. Otherwise you would never get on in life.
right. You can't be a total introvert in the sense of trying to know, the deepest parts of every person around you. I mean, I don't think we would be able to process that anyways. But I do think sometimes we're looking for more than people can offer because some people are more interested in consistency of behavior or consistency in other ways that don't necessarily align with what we think of as consistent. Like I said, like
Yeah, a person's priorities is something
yeah,
that you have to take into account.
right,
Like some will value the social reward over the material reward,
right,
or vice versa.
of
Or
course,
there's so many different drives, so you do need to take that into account because I mean that might shock you. That
right,
because some people can be very trusting and brilliant to talk to one on one, but then come a group, their priorities change.
right, exactly,
For like the social status or whatever, and you'll find that you're on more unstable ground with them, or
right,
whatever, and it's nothing that they've done wrong. It's just that you've assumed incorrectly, so you adjust your view accordingly.
right,
And there's one there's what a user I talked to called Bromide, and she put forward a good point with NI. She noticed that they tend to establish a number of key points in a person.
okay,
For INFJs, they get like a foundation of key identifying points, and then they can make intuitive leaps from that, but it still makes sense
right,
because it has that foundation to it. And you may make mistakes, but you adapt accordingly as you go along, which is why I think INFJs get the whole psychic stereotype.
right, right,
There's always reason to it. You make intuitive leaps, and also over time you build up a pattern of behaviors, like a database of behaviors that you attribute to different types of people,
right,
and you go, oh, so that person's kind of like this, but not quite. It's also kind of like this. So if you put them together, they might be like this, and then kind of test and
right.
kind of goes along.
And I think that makes some people uncomfortable because they feel like it's robbing them of their uniqueness when when because your mind is saying, okay, I have this database of people and what they're like, and this person is kind of behaving like whatever this person or a synthesis of these people, and therefore I'm going to understand them in that way, and some people just want to say, well, why can't you just know me as I'm a unique person? Why don't you just know me? And I think
I've
I
got in trouble with that.
yeah,
You make assumptions,
right. You're
and the
making
person's like,
assumptions.
"Hey, no, no, they're totally wrong." You're like, "Well, there's kind of reason to it." It's like, "Yeah, but I'm the person,
Right,
you know,
right,
I'm the right one in the story." You know,
right, exactly. And I think that sometimes I do. I'm always thinking of the person so in front of me, and I'm really I try to get them to understand if possible that I'm bringing to bear that knowledge for them. You know, that's the and it's not like I don't understand that personality or other things about them, aren't the whole person. It's just that, like you said, that's my
you're,
starting point.
you're like defining the idea of a person,
Yes, that's true.
of the person.
Right.
So obviously you make mistakes, and
Of course. Yeah.
also if someone brings up a problem, you automatically go into like conflict resolution mode or whatever. Want to understand more, and so they might just be laughing about it or whatever.
Right.
You don't really notice. I mean, in person, it's a lot easier, and I never don't really make that mistake in general. But then online, if it's only text, it's a very limited medium.
Right.
So, someone might joking about a problem, and you know, you can't really tell so well.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I think
because you
it.
automatically go into like forethought, like you think ahead, you don't think of like what's happened previously that this person always jokes about this kind of stuff,
Right.
you know, and you're becoming too intensely focused, I guess,
Well,
sometimes.
online too, I think you're only seeing a snapshot of that person. Like you said, it's not the same as when you're interacting. All the tone of voice is not there. None of that's the facial expression. All you have are the
And the culture
words
they were raised in
and the
has a
culture.
lot to do.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And all that information is absent. So really, when people are reading what you write online, a lot of what they're bringing to that is from themselves. Their own preconceptions. And so I notice NTs, they often do get a bad rap for online or in Personality Cafe when they come into intuitive feeler conversations, because if you were talking to them in real life, you would understand that they're not being there's no malintent. But when you just read the words, I think our assumptions come into play, and uh, people do oftentimes get mad at what people write.
Well, that's like the NF failing, isn't it, really?
Right.
You always look at the emotional content or how it would
Yeah.
affect a person. You don't think this person could just be saying it and their intention is to answer a question or
Right.
they see a problem. Like INTJ is there's a friend of mine who I talked to, and the way he described interactions is as transaction,
Yeah.
purely and simply. Um, if someone talks to him, he's thinking, what does this person want from me?
Right.
You know, and he looks at it at that baser level, um, which is like nothing I do. And it's understandable how you can see how like these problems arise. If he's just looking at it in terms of transactions, that's great. I mean, he'll get to the point easily, and quickly and
Right.
simply, and that as far as a general conversational style and looking at the emotional content, it could be making complete errors in terms of the usage of words that he uses. It'd be using lots of accusing language, like saying the reason you're having this problem is that you're doing this, and the other
Right.
person might be getting defensive because the way they're interpreting is that it's their fault, and they're
Right.
coming to their friend for advice or help.
Or
It's a
sympathy.
bit of a
Yeah.
classic error. Or sympathy,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Just a sympathetic ear and they're being blamed, yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's not the intention, but that's how it's coming across.
Yeah.
But
And
they all have their little quirks, though,
right. Of
on
course,
different
as we do. Yeah.
personalities. Yep.
I mean, I
Sorry,
think
what
of
were you
my
saying?
I think of myself as a knowledge seeker too, but it's amazing how much of a difference the priority makes between being relationship oriented and being knowledge seeking oriented. Because oftentimes, like an INTJ, just like you said, is trying to help, but
Mm-hmm.
the relationship is secondary to the transaction of what can I learn from you, what can you learn from me, kind of that's how they seem to connect. And when they're trying to connect on that level, the transaction they're missing out on is the, like you said, the emotional transaction that's also there. But I guess the it takes both people in that kind of conversation to be understanding about that difference in order for there not to be
Yeah,
some kind of conflict.
I mean, what would help in that manner is for the person who asks is to actually know what could go wrong and say, this is what I want,
Right,
out of this.
right,
But then by saying that, you might make yourself feel like you're being, whiny or angry with that person or whatever, a lot of people don't want to admit that, they don't
right,
want to go, okay, I want to talk to you because I'm upset about something, and having like an emotional vent will make me feel better,
right,
because saying that prior to opening up the conversation is just makes you vulnerable or whatever. You don't want to kind of do that.
right.
But, but it would help the INTJ.
Yes, yeah,
So I mean, well, I mean, a lot of INTJs that I spoke to seem to be almost afraid of the emotion of people. They see people as like they can't really predict people's behaviors, and it's something that they're scared about. They want to help, they want to socialize and
right,
join in and stuff, but when people explode at them and they have no idea why, because they're looking at it from a certain perspective,
right.
it's you can see why they develop that kind of uncertainty about socially interacting with certain types of people that are more emotionally charged than others.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing is that really people can even go in with the same goal in mind. Like you said, INTJ wanting to, socialize or even help, and the other person uh, might might be well, let's say SF is more likely for there to be a huge conflict, and that person wants to do the same thing, but the way they go about doing it is so alien to the other person, that misconceptions crop up, and unless somebody takes the time to clarify, like you said, you know, do you want me to help or analyze, or just want me to listen, and or do you just want an attaboy? Like, oh, you were right. That other person was awful.
But
What do
the
you want?
INFJ wouldn't want that, would they?
No, no, we
They'd
wouldn't.
be like, I want to know this without you telling me,
Right.
because I want to show how good I am at this, how much I've been paying attention to you,
Right.
that you don't even need to tell me that. But that's the problem,
Right.
the INFJ.
Yeah.
So,
There's a great book. It's called I can't something like I can't read your mind. I can't read your mind, or something like that, and discusses, like you said, those problems that crop up when you don't clarify. Um, we sort of come to the when we come to the table and use the same words, especially when they're abstract. I think we often make a lot of assumptions about having a shared dictionary of terms that doesn't really exist. You know, I think I've been taught, like, throughout I think my series, I've talked about compassion and what does that mean, and clearly it means very, very different things to different people.
yeah.
Yeah. So when somebody says that person's compassionate, what the information they're communicating is going to vary, not just by it's going to vary by type. I think on what compassion means to that particular type. Uh,
It's not even type, is it? It's like their history as well.
yeah. Well, it's more complicated than type. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Because I mean, just having compassion, it doesn't really explain how much how compassionate a certain person is. Like,
right.
they might do, like, move heaven and earth for another person,
Right.
whereas another person would think that being compassionate is just doing something nice to help someone, and be there for them a little bit to a point. There's different. It's all very variable,
Right.
you depending on the person.
And even the one I personally hate the most, but I know other people do respond to it, is the pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Once I understood that people, when they do that, they're actually trying to help. The idea being that that's supposed to motivate you, right?
Yep.
But that's never how I receive that talk. When people try to help in that manner. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm using.
I think I've heard it before, but no
Okay.
one's used it. Told me that.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
The idea is just nobody's. You can only depend on yourself, so you have to do it yourself. And I'm cheering for you to, overcome this adversity. But that's all that I'm. That's all that I'm going to do. Essentially, is sort of cheer you on. Um,
Was that your
that's it.
family that have told you that?
Yeah, yeah. That's they're
Yeah.
they're SJs, so that's kind of how they go about doing that.
Yeah. I can understand how that would annoy you, especially if it's from you were raised with that people telling you that kind of thing, and then if people tell you that as friends or whatever, it kind of you recall that annoyance.
Right.
Okay, so I can understand how that would irritate. But some people have well, everyone has different sayings that they tend to use. One of like some of them that I find amusing, ENTP. It was like things like "Cheer up, Buttercup" and things like that. I found very entertaining. It used to make me smile every time. It's like, God damn it, I was annoyed.
Yeah.
You can't just diffuse that in like a couple of words.
Right. Well, I not to change topics exactly, but I wanted to get your opinion. Or so now that you are settled on type, it sounds like.
Hmm.
What can you speak to maybe what it's like being a male INFJ, or because we're such a rare part of the population, right? Of the
I'm
1%, we're like we're 25% of the 1% of the population.
okay. Well, I'm not sure I can really speak for the entire INFJ
No,
male community.
right.
I'll go back to them and we'll do a voting thing, and
Okay.
you know, I'll ask them at the next big meeting. But I don't know really. Things that I'd assume which would be kind of telltale signs for like an INFJ, like a young one, would be that you notice the differences in people, how they converse. You're noticing that there's something behind, something different about different people, like different kids rather. Like are more flashy or whatever, some are more reclusive. Or actually notice those differences early on, whereas some people just assume everyone thinks the same or
Right.
whatever, or you have a very self focused thought process. You're just concerning about what pertains to you. Whereas I guess with me, people were the interest, like individual people, like
Right.
knowing that they were different. Like something was taken as something else when you knew that that wasn't the actual intention.
Right.
Things like that doesn't quite seem right, and you kind of get a drive to understand that.
Do you, and
I
do you,
think that was like the initial thing for me.
that wait,
Does that
like
any
how long ago did you realize that, or how long ago did you? You said when you were young. I mean, do you think when you were
uh,
young?
yeah, primary school, early
Okay.
primary school. So yeah, before then it I was more just reactive to the environment. Primary school, it was starting to kind of kick in, and
Okay.
like more of an understanding that something's not quite, there's no agreement in how things are defined in a discussion context. Everything seems to be uh, from a different perspective.
Right.
So, and then
Yeah.
I think from there I started to explore people more. I think, and just understand people. I seem to be more motivated, or like I preferred the more introverted people, um, and the more interesting people as well. So people that were very routine and very um, very traditional. That didn't really appeal to me because I was my family's religion is Protestant or Christian,
Hmm.
so I already kind of knew those values, so they weren't so interesting. But like the things that I found interesting were people that kind of went at life in a different way, you know. So I mean, I think in secondary school, I knew like the most drug dealers in like the whole
Yeah,
of school. They were the more interesting people, you know. They were very untraditional and things like that. Whereas people who were very traditional, I didn't really care to, you know, it seemed very plain, I
right.
guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think about it in terms of how I approached. I was raised Foursquare, which is a variant of Christianity, Protestant Christianity, and one of the things I picked up on real early was well, two things. One, that I picked up on inconsistencies. Like when there's a a long sermon about helping those in need, and then when a homeless person, there was an incident when a homeless person wanted to come in and sit in service with everybody, and the ushers wouldn't let him in. To me that was a
So you
huge.
noticed the
Oh yes,
inconsistencies on morality,
yeah,
first
absolutely,
of all.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't have the language for it to understand what was going on at the time, but yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to take that? You can take that call if you want. I can pause this.
I know it wasn't for me.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I just like, you know, all this is being recorded. It's a very stereotypical ringtone, like
Okay.
for an English person. That's kind of why I chose it.
Okay.
I thought it's pretty funny. I love stereotypes. I think they're hilarious. Like there's I've got very stereotypical humor. I guess I like playing on them, and so I've got that.
Out of I actually read about sort of INFJs get this mysticism sort of rap, but I think if you've ever been to the site, is it infjs.com? It's the Vicky Joe site. Vicky Joe's site. Some people really hate it, and there are parts that are way overgeneralized, but she talks about INFJs being ornery. I, and that word, have you ever heard that word before? Um,
Being what? Sorry,
it's ornery. Have you ever,
no, I haven't heard that word
okay.
before. No.
Essentially, it's sort of like Bugs Bunny-ish in liking to, stir things up or cause a little bit of trouble, a little bit of practical joking, kind of, as being part of the INFJ personality. I don't know if you found that to be true about yourself. I definitely find that to be true in terms of my closest friends. I do tend to be that way a little bit.
Um, I am kind of jokey, I guess. But I prefer humor to make people at ease, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and I used to like religiously watch stand-up comedians
Okay.
like Jimmy Carr or Bill Bailey, and you know those kind of ones I really like. And I tend to use some of those kind of jokes in conversation or similar kind of styled jokes. But I'm not sure about. I'm not like I don't play practical pranks on
Okay.
people. It's not really the kind of thing I do. But I do have very dry, sarcastic humor, I guess. Um, which and yeah, I guess yeah, I imagine that's more the case.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Well, it's not mean
than not.
spirited. It's not mean spirited. It's
Yeah,
just
it's not mean spirited. No.
right. Yeah.
But it'd be playing on what is kind of wrong or almost insulting to kind of get the other person doing a double take,
Yeah.
you know,
That.
and think
Yeah.
deeper about it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's true. Like I would, well, to use a chess term, I tend to uh, conversationally fork things, um, where people would assume it's this insult, but it's not. You know, it's this other one. You know, I made a joke with my mum recently, and it kind of set her up, and it implied that she wasn't that smart. And she went, "Oh, what are you saying that because I'm blonde?" And I said, "No, I'm saying that because you're old." you know, just to just to have that kind of she wouldn't have won either way
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Right. I think
But I like that
that's
kind of humor.
pretty much what I'm talking about as far as being ornery, or according to that word. Yeah, I was. It's pretty American. I think. I bet you it has English roots, but probably you guys forgot about it. You came up with the better words, abandoned it 100 years ago. But it's very maybe Southern in origin, sort of that idea of being ornery. But my grandmother used to call me that when I was young, and so when I saw that word on Vicky Joe's site, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty unique word that you don't see very often, and to come up in that description kind of hit a chord anyway.
Is that the one with like dolphins everywhere?
I'm not sure if that's it. I think that's Dolphins Cove. I think is the name of that particular site.
Vicky Joe, is it?
Yeah, Vicky Joe.
Yeah, I've been on this one before. Yeah, it's the loads of dolphins everywhere.
Oh, it is. Okay, all right.
Yep. Yeah, I remember reading that one ages ago when I was um, trying to see if I was an INFP or INFJ.
Hmm.
Um, it didn't really help because a lot of how it described an INFJ seemed very overhyped
Yes.
and very much to the point of a stereotype, I guess.
Right.
They never seemed, um, but no, it never seemed to really help in that regard. It's great to say that they help people out and they're very they like to guide people, but so do INFPs. Depending on what their
Yes.
moral system is.
Right.
So is any other type. Really. I mean, you can get like ENTJs. Their stereotype is like cutthroat business people that you will always lose against.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the case if they're like people orientated. I mean, there's one ENTJ that I know who's very people oriented, and she's just brilliant. Like she organizes bus trips for the women's institution and all that kind of stuff. Like she's like a pillar in the community,
Yeah.
and she wouldn't go like people wouldn't if you read the ENTJ description, you wouldn't really think that was her because, and especially the social stereotype against ENTJs, you just wouldn't put it together.
Right.
You would think, oh, this person's got to be a feeler, because they're very people orientated. There's a lot of stereotypes about the different functions,
I
which
think
is
one
very
ENT. Go ahead. Detrimental to the process of finding type, you think? Or, I mean,
to everything,
yeah.
really. I mean, it's not just finding your own type; it's also how you interact with
Yeah,
other
right.
types. I mean,
That's a
if
larger
you're a
consequence.
feeler, you might think T types are unfeeling, or if you're a P, you're allowed to be messy or whatever. Whereas if you're a J type, you have to be really tidy and clean.
Right.
It it just it's really unusual, and you shouldn't really define yourself by your type anyway. I mean,
Right.
it's supposed to more be a platform, I guess, than anything else. Well, not even that. It's just like something to note to some people, depending on. I mean, you can take from it what you want, really.
Right.
Or you can just choose to ignore it. You don't have to nail yourself into that category and only live by those definitions.
Right. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, when I don't understand how people would do that. Even. I've read tons, on the subject, and I never think, oh, my type says, my description says X, Y, Z, so I have to be that way. Um, it seems. I mean, I don't have that drive. I think what brings me to it more is when I want to know somebody else's type is how do I communicate with this person. Like the ENTJ example you gave, that's a great example. I've only met one ENTJ that knew he was an ENTJ. He was from Canada, and he came to one of my meetups, and he definitely focused the conversation. That was one thing I noticed, but it was on what he was suggesting is that socialized medicine, universal healthcare should be available in America like it is in Canada. So that was his.
It's in England.
What's
as
that?
well. It's in
Oh, in
England.
England, right,
We've
right,
got the NHS, which was formed during World War II, I think, when everything was going very much tits up, as it were.
right, right,
and and it kind of stuck. Although they're thinking, well, they're wanting to change that, but I personally, I don't think that's a good idea. But
right.
that's another topic, I guess.
Oh,
I'm
well,
biased though. My mum's a nurse, so
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, my wife works with an insurance company, but we're still both pro, universal health care. But I mean, the point was more that you might think ENTJ, what do they care? Why do they would they care about healthcare? I, but ultimately they're interested in taking that particular gentleman was interested in helping people, wanting people to be taken care of. Um,
yeah.
the ultimate reason might be different than it would be with an INFJ. I think for me that would be enough. I think you take care of people, then you have more people on their own 2 feet to be able to contribute to society. And I think maybe that's ultimately also where the ENTJ is going with that idea. It's not. It's less because of the people and more because of
The
the
goal.
the goal. But we're on this. We can be
But
on the
they
same
also
page.
they do have a knack for being detached as well. I don't mean that in an emotional sense, but they know that this is a job, and then this is their life, and the
Right.
reason they're doing their job is to to live and be able to pay for stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's whereas I guess INFJs are more likely to be very involved in
Right.
that kind of a pursuit. You
Right.
know.
Well, the
I can't speak from
compartmentalizing.
experience in that regard, but
I think the compartmentalizing is a problem with for INFJs because we don't have that ability to sort of flip a switch and forget about everything that happened during the day and go home and live our lives. It's we carry things with us. I think that's all
yeah,
NFs
there's
are like that.
always after hours processing going on.
Yes, yes, yeah,
So.
um,
Yeah, I mean, because usually that's all I'm thinking about. Like at the end of the day or whatever, it's just thinking about the different interactions. What I could have said better. What I,
oh, good.
said well, or what this person said and what that could mean, and you know, essentially breaking down the conversation.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, I lost that last bit of what you said. Something,
Where did you hear up to?
um, the process of breaking down what people said, and then you said something else,
To
and then
get a better understanding of that person
oh yeah, okay, yeah,
and their motivation, that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's quite difficult. I mean, I wouldn't say every one person's unique, but I would say that there is a lot of variation. I mean, you have um, their work culture or work environment rather,
right,
actual culture they were raised in, their more social like peer culture or whatever. Like for instance, half my family is American,
hmm,
half of it's English, and you would have thought that it would be very similar. Like the words that you use translate across perfectly, and it's not the case in the
right,
slightest.
hmm,
You know, Americans seem to have a better respect for their history and what their family went through, and they almost seem to incorporate that as part of their identity, or
right,
a lot of people seem to. Whereas England, what I kind of noticed is that doesn't really factor in the slightest,
okay,
nor does well, I couldn't care less really, sorry, split offensive, but yeah, I mean, that's someone else. It would be interesting, but it's not part of who I am. I'm a different person, obviously. So
right,
I don't really think about that so much. Like I know my dad has a very um, he's like well, his dad did this, and did this for a living to provide food and all this kind of stuff, and then I've done this. It's kind of like building up like a legacy throughout the family kind of thing.
yeah,
Whereas I don't think like that at all. I just think that as individual people living their lives.
right.
I mean, sure, they're family, but it doesn't have much of a bearing on my how I live my life.
I think that's
You can
very.
choose to incorporate it. It's not ingrained.
You don't have to, right? And
Yeah, it's
that's very sort of SJ. It's that SJ security orientation where if you do what's been done before, that's the safe thing to do. Then things will continue to be the same. But I think intuitives tend to think things change. How do we anticipate that change, and how do we adapt to it before it happens, so that we're better off instead of worse off when that change occurs. But so we get our secure. Really, we are also looking for security, but it's in a very different way than SJs tend to go about that same process. It's sort of like all the people living under is it Pompeii? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. It's under Mount Vesuvius. Around that area. There's no real escape plan, I understand. And they're like all these people living around this volcano. And if you ask them, do you worry about it? Most of the people say no. It hasn't. Nothing's happened during my lifetime. Yeah, but I mean, it's going to happen. It's only a matter of time. But
that reminds me of Al Murray joke.
okay,
And
go ahead.
they say about California and how it's built on the San Andreas Fault.
Right, right.
And he goes, typical American behavior, trying to palm the blame off onto some poor Mexican.
Yeah.
It's your fault for building it there in the first place,
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't seem amazingly sensible to live around a volcano. Although I imagine it's a nice feature, very scenic and all,
Oh yeah,
but
it's beautiful.
something that may kill you, not such a great idea. I mean,
Right.
there's houses in England that you get the councils that we get floodplains, and the councils go, oh, that's a good idea. Why don't you sell off this land?
Right.
And get loads of money, funding or whatever, increase the population so they get more funding, and build houses there. It's great, but it's England and it's a floodplain. I mean, the
Right.
clue's in the name.
Right.
It's not like it's easy to misinterpret. It's going to flood given a certain amount of water. Why would you ever want to build houses on it? There's people that move in, they don't really know, and then they have to buy sandbags and all that kind of stuff to
Right.
stop themselves from being completely flooded.
And then from our perspective, it's probably just short-sighted. I mean, the definition. A floodplain is always part of the river. It's just not a part of the river that the river always uses. That's filled with water. I think for at least for STJs, that efficiency thing, and maybe STPs too, that risk-taking thing. It's more like, well, yeah, it's going to happen, but let's use it while we can. And then
Also, it hasn't happened for such a long time.
yeah,
There's no need to worry.
right. Yeah, I mean, and even that's part of how America got into the debt crisis. Same thing, sort of like relying on this thing that's been here. Everybody's in debt. It's like that's the problem. That is the problem, is that we keep doing the same thing without trying to bring a new solution to the table that can that instead of putting off the inevitable disaster, why can't we try to solve it ahead of time? But most people are just not interested in doing that unless they think that they can get a profit off of it, in their lifetime somewhere.
Well, I mean, I don't really know much about the financial situation that happened in America, but it's generally people are generally short-sighted.
Yes.
Why would they care about what happens 1,000 years from now?
Right.
Because that's someone else's problem.
Right.
And unless they can find a way of getting a short-term benefit, something that they'll generate revenue on a short-term basis, it's just not a feasible idea.
Right.
Like, for example, a country completely swapping over to renewable energy sources straight off. Like, that would be great for England because we import a ridiculous amount of energy from other countries. But they don't. And then we build nuclear power stations. That makes sense. It's an island, a very small island.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's likely,
Right.
but come on.
Right.
Even the possibility, it wouldn't bode well for the majority of the population. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. The risk, even if it's a low risk, sometimes if the chance of harm is so humongous,
Correct.
It's still a bad choice.
But you still got the whole. You can't. It's difficult to make that kind of a choice when you're already facing a problem that's quite severe.
Right.
So I mean, farmers like in Africa, they get paid like for dumping waste. You know, they don't want to do it, but they're in such, you know, financial straits that
Yes.
they need the income now.
Right.
You know, and it will make it worse for them later down the line. But they have to survive. You know, to actually
Right.
get to further down the line.
Yeah. No, I know. I know
You
what
know,
you mean. That I remember
there's trade-offs.
they I don't know if it was America, whatever. It was some country delivered a whole bunch of seeds with the idea that they were gonna plant them. You know, in it was one of the African countries, and instead the people ate the seeds. Is but you know they were because they're starving. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, no,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, but part of that,
It's the whole buy a fish or teach a man to
yeah,
fish. You know, you
right.
still got to get the fish. You
You
know, you
still gotta
still
get the
got to
fish. You
still
gotta
got to wade
survive
out in
long
the
enough to learn how
world.
to fish. Yeah,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah. So, and maybe
And
it's
plus, a lot of people from the more developed areas, they don't know starvation like that.
no,
You know, they don't know that kind of environment. It's close to impossible to envision
right,
when you haven't experienced anything remotely close to it. I mean, you get the Oxfam adverts, but then that's an Oxfam advert. You know,
right,
initially they provided a great shock to people, which made loads of people participate and stuff like that. But over time, you become desensitized to it.
right.
So you just expect that of an Oxfam advert. You know, so you don't particularly want to donate any money because you're kind of used to it. You know, it's an Oxfam advert. That's what you expect from them.
I think also
Just for the record, I donate. I'm just saying.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean I donate, but not. It's more to the impoverished people here. So it's true that I guess I don't donate to international causes as much. Like when when bad things happen, I usually open up my pocketbook. Like when the tsunami occurred.
Mhm.
But I think I do fall into the trap, like so many other people, that when a problem looks like totally insurmountable, it seems like no matter how much money or time is dumped into this problem, it's not gonna go away. It's sort of like gonna be there anyway. It's easy to throw your hands up. I think my way of thinking is more like we should be able to locally shore up our own, take care of our own poor, so that those
Yeah.
people can turn around and sort of pay it forward. Whether or
Mhm.
not that would actually happen, I don't know. But that's sort of how my way of sort of rationalizing, I guess, the decisions I make.
Well, with England, it's one of those things where you really should look after your own country till you're at a certain level, and then look after other
Yeah,
people's. Or,
absolutely.
you know, because if people are giving loads of money to other countries, it's great. It's a wonderful cause. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Right,
But also, we do have our own problems. They're just like better disguised and not very well
right,
advertised. You know,
right. Uh,
it's difficult though. But then, you know, helping a person. Or we're given the understanding that if we donate this money, it will help this person feed themselves.
right,
You know, we're also raised to believe that's a good thing. That's the morals that we've been taught as young people. So, you know, it depends really. I mean, like again, going with the whole Africa thing, you know, you get the kids that are running around completely homeless, and
right,
they try and get scraps off of strangers that are, you know, actually able to afford a meal, you know,
right,
and they give the scraps to the kids. Whatever, if they did that, if there was a kid that was doing that in England, that kid would be loaded up with food. He wouldn't be able to move.
right, right,
Yeah.
right,
You know, I don't know, it's just about the perception. Whereas, like over there, they, you know, people might give the kids the scraps, they might not, you know, but because I mean, I was raised with more Christian kind of values, so to help out a starving person, you know, is
no
that's
brainer.
what I would do. You know, I wouldn't even
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah, right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, and I don't think like I don't pretend that we're not part of an international community or a world community. That's to me that's obviously true. Um, but it
Well,
seems
essentially, the different countries is more of an illusion because you are on the same planet. You
yes,
know, what you do does affect other countries. I
right,
imagine during England's industrial period, we were completely screwing over another country in fumes, you know.
right,
So, you know, um, it's difficult though because I mean that's why there's a lot of incohesion, and that's why you kind of got like religion. I mean, um, I wouldn't say I'm especially religious. I do pertain to the Christian kind of values
Right.
more than others. I mean, I got like the idea of Buddhism rather. I like, I think that's pretty neat. Um, but essentially, I see religion as more of a social tool that helps cohesion in groups of people where there are larger numbers, because it's aligning people's moralities so that they understand that if they kill a person, there will be bad consequences on them. I mean, people aren't, and people don't, get born and then it's ingrained into them genetically or
Right.
whatever.
It's not
You know,
magic, right? Yeah.
I'm not just saying that a kid will automatically want to kill another kid. I'm just saying, it's the religion helps teach that. That's why I kind of like religion. Like as a kid in primary school, I never actually saw that as fact. Like given the Bible readings and things like that, I never saw that as that's what happened. But what I did understand was like the moral lessons behind it, and I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed the story that the preacher told. Um, and I took the moral lessons from it, but I never took it as that's what happened ever. So
Right.
not that I think that people who do believe that is being ridiculous or anything like that. I'm just saying that's what I took from
Right.
those.
Well, it was to me. See, now when I was raised to believe that that's the
That's how
literal
it is.
truth. That's how it was. Yeah, and I did
Yeah,
believe
right.
that for a while, but it was in elementary school
Hmm.
where I finally, I sort of, in looking at maybe that those inconsistencies in how what people said and how they treated each other, and I sort of would expect that people wearing certain religious badges would be more compassionate or giving, and that I didn't observe that, and the more I learned, I think that's the great thing about being an INFJ. So one reason I wouldn't trade it for anything is that over time. That compulsion to grow and learn and and help really does give us this power to grow. That's not as easy for other people to, or other, well, not all the types, but a lot of other people have trouble accessing that because they, instead of wanting to change or thinking of change as something that happens automatically, they think of change as threatening and something that they want to avoid.
Hmm.
So I mean, I do like that aspect of being an INFJ.
Yeah, I mean, all different types have their own area of growth that
Sure.
they usually go through, regardless. But you're absolutely right. Like INFJ, it's more of growth of like own personal growth. It's not necessarily knowledge seeking, but it's more people understanding and seeing how people interact or whatever that gives their own kind of growth, which allows them to
Right.
help other people that may be in a bit of a tricky situation, whereas others wouldn't understand it.
Right.
They may think, well, we started off on the same level. I mean, you didn't do as well with your life. It doesn't mean I have to help you because I'm quite successful.
Exactly. Right.
I'm not saying that's always going to be the case with every person. I'm just saying that's one take on it. Whereas an INFJ would kind of get to understand what may have happened.
Right. Yeah. I'm not saying that not everybody has the capability, but I do believe that our cognitive functions sort of naturally lead to certain behaviors or certain ways of thinking. That doesn't mean, and in fact, the more we learn about that, the more we can transcend that. Break out of those molds. I think it's
Well, we also put ourselves in molds anyway.
of course, yeah,
I am a
we do that
Christian.
too.
I am this MBTI type.
Right.
We seem, well, I think it adds security, the feeling of security. There are other people that are in the same situation. I mean, the thing with if you're a Christian, you know that other Christians are more likely to live by that set of moral rules. So you're going to almost feel safe in that regard. I mean, I know a couple of people they're touring around America in this beat up. Was it like a wagon thing,
Okay.
VW Volkswagen,
Yeah.
and they're heavily Christian, and they are parking their car in like Walmart car parks, you
Right.
know, and people are inviting them over for 3 hours or whatever, and I think it's more because they are very hardcore Christians, you know, and people go, oh, you know, Christians, I'm Christian, you know, help a person out. I mean, there is a really nice uh, uh, what's that, like familiarity that you have in America in that regard, you know, that you don't have, or that I haven't noticed so much in England, is, you know, Christians, they all seem to, you know, they go to church, they know each other really well, and they help each other out, and there's more of a community. You know, our churches haven't seemed, or our church communities haven't seemed to really gone with the times.
Okay.
You know, like we still have the traditional choirs, and you know, although some do kind of go with the times, but you've got some that just stick to the traditional material, like the singing and the normal structure or whatever. I mean, we're like, you know, bring the American choirs over here. You know, they go with the more modern stuff. It's like really great to listen to. It's like, oh yeah, we'll go to the church then, you know, and it's very interesting the different contrasts and like. The Americans are very tend to be quite friendly, or depending where you go.
Right.
Like the Northeast, I lived there for 3 years, and it was very fast. Well, I wouldn't say it's very fast paced. It was quite quickly fast paced, especially in comparison to the more southern states, which are more laid back. And it was quite interesting to see such a comparison. I mean, we have a similar thing between the north and the south in England. You know, the northern areas are where the more like you had the more industry,
Hmm.
the more factories rather, and the mining and that kind of stuff. And the south have always been the richer kind of areas of England, and they're considered like a bit quicker, and the northerners are seen as like the stronger, you know, because they you had the mining and all that kind of stuff, and you know you got the stereotypes. The northerners are called poor northern monkeys, and the southerners are what was it southern fairies, you know. So I mean, you get that kind of thing. But I mean, it's
Right.
even per town as well, or city rather, like Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester. They all have their different stereotypes. It's quite interesting how America has those too. But I find it great that you have that with religion as well. But it's so understood, you know, so ingrained in some people that they'll just open their doors to people just because they share the same religion.
Right.
That's amazing. Whereas England, I mean, people struggle talking to each other when they're in the same bus. How dare you acknowledge me? You know, and like same on the train. You know, it's like a social rule. It's like a taboo to talk to the person in the same like train uh, thing as you. You know, how dare you talk to the person next to you? You've got to try and avoid eye contact at all costs. Just look either straight ahead or down slightly. Don't look like a threat, but don't look like you're a pushover. You know, read the newspaper if you can. So you know, it's kind of like it's very strange. Whereas in America, people seem to be quite friendly. Um, in general, you know, they'll kind of get on with each other quite more naturally. As England, you kind of gotta we're not great talkers, I don't think, and very passive people, very passive aggressive as well for the majority. It's quite a contrast when you compare to Ireland, whereas there I was astounded. I went to Ireland for a long weekend, and we took this cab that was supposed to be taking us to this bed and breakfast, and he didn't know where he was going. He knew the general area, and it's like, yeah, you know, we'll take you, it'll be great, you know. And it's like going along. It's like I've got to be honest, I have no clue where this place is. All right, okay. He goes, I'm going to stop the meter and we can go up and down the street. And he didn't have a clue. He saw another taxi. He'll just stop the car, go out and talk to the other driver and say, do you know where this place is? He didn't know the guy. I
Right.
mean, if that would never happen in England, you know, at all. I mean, especially like places like Manchester. I'm not saying this is always the case, but a friend of mine that lived up there said if a person goes up to you and asks you what the time is, kick them as hard as you can and run away because he's about to mug you. You know, it's just it's a bit of a contrast.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it really depends here. America's so big population wise and geographically that uh, places can be night and day. I've lived mostly on the West Coast, but I've lived for a bit in so Washington, Oregon, California. I've lived in New York and Arizona, Montana, and um, there are huge differences. But I think the weird thing is, I don't think it's religion that keeps us cohesive, as it were. I think it's the media. I think.
So, but I mean, there's many different things that keep people cohesive in America
Oh
as
yeah,
well. I
yeah,
mean,
right,
you have the religion, you have the political drivers or whatever. I mean, Americans seem very good at quickly establishing a social community for a particular subject or,
right.
or motivation or whatever. The English seem to be terrible at that. And I find it quite astounding. It's like, well, this is a new subject. This is our community. We're going to make it right now. There's going to be a website. There's going to be
Right.
there's going to be an agency or whatever regarding it, or a council rather, and it all builds up really rapidly. So it's quite interesting. It's very much people like for a lot of Americans, it seems that you're defined by what you do. There's not much hiding it for a lot of people. They're big into football, or they're big into this or big into that. And there's a very complex social system with each subject. It's quite interesting how quickly it builds up.
It's broad. I think. Well, when you're talking about sort of the stereotypical, American extrovert, that's true. I'm not. I'm
I'm
not.
not saying it's for everyone. I'm just saying
Right. In general.
there's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Generally, yeah.
I. But I think what you're saying about. I think we do always try to find some superficial thing that connects us. I mean, there are all different kinds of Christians, but if you say I'm Christian, I think you're right that that's going to establish a sort of common ground for a lot of people. But really, almost anything will do. I mean, if you're a fan of a particular sports team, and you come across some other fans, they're going to take you on board.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, from my kind of perspective, I find it really puzzling. Why would you do that? It doesn't make sense. You don't know that other person. Why would you? But then I guess that's a failing of myself, maybe in that regard. Is that maybe I should do that more often? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to helping out a hitchhiker, maybe. As long as I made sure he had no hidden weapons or
Yeah,
anything like that.
exactly.
Generally psychotic. Be quite happy to do that, I guess. But I wouldn't automatically think it. Although I do kind of do that kind of stuff. I do help people out in general, but I do also understand it's a bit unusual to do so.
Right.
But
Well, I
but
think
England
that.
has stereotypes of other countries. Like you'll find Canadians, they're quite set if they go touring around England, and we seem to understand the whole conflict that America has with Canada. And like if they get it wrong, it'll be like, so you're an American? They'll go Canadian and be like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry,
Right.
no,
Right.
let me help you with this or whatever, or vice versa. So it's quite weird the country perception of other countries.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Speaking of which, I was curious. Have you? I know there are a couple meetup groups for intuitives in England. Have you ever attended one of those events?
No, I have no, I didn't even know there were. I mean, I guess there would be some, but I never thought to attend
Okay.
or leave. Really. But
Um,
yeah, so you're part of quite a large social group and that's MBTI oriented, or is it more temperament orientated? It's NF, wasn't it?
really most of the events are NF and NT, so it's generally intuitives. There are a few events that are just NFs or type specific, but the understanding there isn't really. It's not really about exclusion. It's really just about finding it's being able to talk about issues specific to type or specific to temperament. Like
So,
INFPs. Oh, go ahead.
I would say I noticed with forums, especially of a singular MBTI type, it tends to have rapid growth to a point, and then it becomes detrimental to the individual. Like, and you'll get the same topics over and over again.
Right, right.
Which I'd imagine that would be for any um, forum or whatever that's specific to a certain type. And I
Interesting.
imagine I wonder if that would happen. But if it's NF types predominantly, then that's four different types. So I guess
Right.
it's not necessarily going to happen, but I imagine there is sometimes where it becomes a little bit stale.
It's possible, but I mean, it does seem like there's always something new, and I think that's part of the sort of beauty of having a whole bunch of intuitives is that whenever we sit down with each other, we're always bringing, something new, something deeper, or something broader, and so the conversations do seem to just be pretty organic. They don't seem to go stale. Even though we talk about MBTI, we talk about it as it pertains to something new or to something else. So that actually hasn't happened. But now I do understand what you mean about sort of hanging out on only your forum.
Yep.
I think I do think of the INFJ and actually INFP too as sort of a home haven, and I don't venture out too much. But I think I think it's a good to have a place to feel safe, and then from there you can always go out and explore. And people do that. I know there are a lot of INFJs that never post an INFJ forum. They post, in the
I think that's the majority.
forums.
There's a lot
You think
of
so?
members. There's many members there that just never post.
Yeah.
You know, they keep out of it, I guess.
Or
But,
they've gotten enough out of the idea of MBTI, they move on to something else like
that's true.
Enneagram or some of the other
Yep.
topics.
Or they might have done what I did actually, is like kind of introduce myself, throw up a couple of topics to attract certain individuals, and then just talk to each of those one on one.
Right.
Add them to Skype and then move on, kind of thing.
Right.
Which yeah, that's what I tend to do, is just oh, that person's quite interesting, add those and talk to them or whatever, and then just kind of trail for specific people, I guess. It's really
That's
weird.
interesting.
I don't really converse publicly with people on opinions or whatever. It's more one-on-one,
Right.
and I'll post a couple. I think I've made a couple of posts on Personality Cafe that are just more general or specific to a certain type, just to get an idea of the community, and then more probably like go after specific people,
Okay.
that I find quite interesting. I don't know what makes them that way. Is just certain things, I guess. But yeah. So I don't really have a group mentality very much. I'm very independent,
Right.
and I tend to pick and choose who I talk to. I'm not very good in a group. I'm not. I don't know. Not really sure why. My dad wasn't either. So I don't know if that's more of a tendency that I picked up with him, or just due to environment, whatever. But I never really, very much a team player. If I see something is wrong, it will be wrong regardless if the group agree, thinks
Right.
it isn't or not. I just might not mention anything, about it. So, I mean, I've had that when working in assignment groups before at uni. It's terrible. It's like if there's a leader type person, perfectly fine. They can take the reins. I don't care. As long as they're making correct decisions, it doesn't bother me at all. But we've had problems before where no one really wanted to step forward. But the trouble with me is I like everyone to have like an even keel in those kind of groups, and it's a bit difficult when people don't want to participate. So I try and encourage them, and it just goes nowhere. At the end, it becomes like a time you had coming near the time constraint, and it's like, okay, right, I just want you to do this, 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 and this. You do this, because you're good at this. And it becomes completely imperialistic, I guess, or anything else. But that's because that's out of need, because otherwise we're all kind of in a bad situation.
Right. That's interesting. I really haven't had those same kind of issues. Or now I don't get along with groups generally. This intuitive group. I mean, one of the reasons, even though I do, give a lot to the group, I also get a lot back from the group. I mean, I come away from it feeling lots better, and I'm getting my intuitive fix, as it were.
What is it? More like a sit in a group circle, and then discuss, or
Yeah, it's that. There are events too where you can go walk in a garden or something. There are events like that, but most of the time it's the talking. I mean, because that's what I'm missing in my life for the most part, is being able to talk to somebody on that intuitive level.
The social security, I guess, and
Sure, yeah,
and enforcing that there are people that do think this way, and it helps being on the same kind of wavelength as other people as well.
yes,
It does
right,
provide security and encouragement, I guess, as well.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, but normally, like you
That'd be
said,
good for
okay,
people
go
who
for
have
it.
social anxiety, I can imagine.
Right, yeah, and a lot of NFs do, because it's been hammered into their heads that you're not supposed to be that way, you know. So they do sometimes come in with those kind of issues. I I had a lot of that, but not really early in my life, so it doesn't affect me quite as much.
Yeah. So it doesn't knock your confidence so much. Usually,
Right,
if you find if it happens really early on, it's very difficult to overcome if possible.
right,
It's because if it's really early on, you can't understand it, or it's
right,
very difficult. There's a lot of gaps
right,
there. It's but you all you know is that bad sense of something that could happen or might happen, or whatever.
right.
You know, it's very difficult. I've got a friend who's he's not he's not an NF, but he has social anxiety, and he's Chinese. He comes from China, and he when he gets stressed, and he does become socially stressed when he's giving a presentation. He's accidentally switched to Chinese before. Midway through,
Yeah.
you can imagine it. You're like midway through talking perfectly fine, then it automatically quickly switches to Chinese, and then like going, any questions? Everyone's like, um, I've got one. you know,
What did you just say? Yeah. No, I and I think it's in those kind of situations where, I mean, if somebody hypes up, um, and if nobody's critical of that person after they make something a mistake or something like that, then you learn that it's not a big deal. You learn to just cope with those things better. But if everybody laughs at this guy after that happens, it only reinforces that sort of negative experience, and it gets worse and worse, I think.
but you also do need to be able to cope with a confliction, like
Right,
or a confrontation of that kind
right,
of nature as well. But you're absolutely right in that it really doesn't help if you're putting yourself out there. You're trying something new and then you get completely shot down initially.
right, right,
Not great for the old confidence in that one.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like yeah. Whenever we're trying something new, it helps to have somebody sort of, you know, um, take it a little bit easy, or at least from my perspective. And then once we're competent, then it's the time to challenge me, to do better. But I think oftentimes people tend to jump the gun on the encouragement part and go straight for the challenging, uh, and it doesn't. If the timing's not right, then you're doing the opposite of helping them. When you do that, I don't know.
Well, that's also with. Oh, damn! I just forgot what I was about to say midway. Like in regards to the MBTI. There we go. In regards to the MBTI, the person would go, "Oh wow, I'm INFP, INFJ, INFTP, whatever," and that's wow, this really resonates with me, and you'll join this group and go, "Yeah, I'm this type. I'm really happy about this," and they'll go, "No, you're not." And then they'll be completely crestfallen, you know, like completely ruin their confidence level. You feel foolish or whatever, and it doesn't help, I guess. But
Yeah,
then, how would other types receive that kind of? Because I know INTPs, they have a tendency of shooting people down if they come on initially strong.
right,
It's like, yeah, I might like you, but you're a bit too big for your boots at the moment, so I'm just going to insult you initially.
right.
I'm just going to knock you down a couple of pegs, and then we'll be okay. It's quite amusing. I like INTPs. They're pretty funny, and like they open up a social introduction with the equivalent of artillery fire. They were just like got really strongly like like an amplified version of their trollish selves or whatever. And you know, it's almost like a social test. You know, this is them amplified. You know, if you can cope with this, you know, then you're worth getting to know. With INTPs, you know, they're like, you know, they will get to know you then. You know, you kind of passed the first test kind of thing. But it's interesting how they kind of how they act that kind of way, and it seems to be across the board. You know, I don't know if it holds true with everyone. It probably won't, but it seems to work with the majority. Like with ENTPs, it's amusing with when they start when they join a forum, they'll be like, "I'm going to put this argument out there. It's going to be like this is a certainty, and I'm going to pertain to this, and I'm going to argue it until there is, you know, there is no possible way that I could be right."
Right.
And then I'll adopt that person's view, and then that will be 100% right. You know, they'll just like stand on the soapbox and go, "Ha, take this," and then argue it to the death. And then if the other person puts forward a flawless argument, it's like, "Oh, okay, then I'll adopt that one." You know,
Right.
they like to kind of go with that. It's pretty funny. And like initially, I didn't understand that, so I thought that was just irritating. You know, why like creating this much conflict
Right.
in amongst a community? It's not conducive to anything. You know, why would you want to do that? It's just irritating people or upsetting people or whatever. But it's actually kind of amusing. What, you know, once they figured that out,
Right.
you know, and kind of saw it out that way, and it's like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty funny. Now I look like that. There's a ENTP that I used to talk to quite a bit, and in the secondary school he was part of the debate team, and he had the Constitution, you know, in a little handy book thing, and you know, the other team would argue a point. He went, actually, that's not true, you know, because as you can see here in this book, you've got this line that clearly states, you know, and he was completely blagging the whole thing. He was making it up completely wrong, but because he had this book, you know, that was official, and you know, he opened it up and he gave a reasonable statement that's kind of sounded official.
Right.
The other team just couldn't argue it. He was just completely lying his ass off. I just that was brilliant. I would have found that incredibly frustrating if I was on the other team. It's like, that's not fair in the slightest, and, you know, but it's really funny. Like looking back.
Nobody ever caught him though. Nobody ever, or nobody.
No
Would,
one caught him. That
oh
was the
my
brilliant.
goodness.
It was fantastic. You know, he just got away with it. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on that one. If it ever comes up, and we're like, I want to see it right now in writing. Magnifying glass. Yeah. Cross check.
Yeah.
But it's pretty amusing. But they all have their little quirks. ENFPs, being the entertainer, they're fun to talk to. I tend to frustrate them a lot. I don't know if that's an INFJ trait, but if I find something funny, I'm more going to think, oh, that's quite funny. You know, that's amusing. I
Right.
won't really react. I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing as well, because, you know, you've got those different variables. But they'll keep making jokes. I absolutely frustrated the ENFP. He's like, you know, he doesn't find me funny. So I was like, yes, I do. He goes, well, you don't laugh. You know, you don't. So I was like,
Right.
I sometimes smile, I guess, but I do find you funny. You know, I like talking to you. And he just didn't think that I did, because I didn't give him that response.
Right.
You know, the facial, like, laughing out loud. I didn't make it obvious. He kind of feeds and understands people off of that kind of response. But I don't tend to give that, because I'm quite a guarded individual in that sense. You know,
Right.
I'll just think about stuff, or just, you know, keep back and not really participate. You know, just observe, I guess.
Well, I think
Because
it's the extroversion part of that equation that makes because some extroverts will say, oh, introverts are like stuck up, and they, you know, don't want anything to do
they're
with us.
shy, I think,
Yeah.
is a popular one.
Or that they're shy when in fact we're just
Or
processing,
in,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. But it was. I think it was. Yeah, it was Rena who made a video on introversion and extroversion, I
Yes,
believe.
that's right. She did just
Like,
recently.
and clarifying it, because I think a family member of hers is a chartered MBTI type person, and she better defined, because there's a lot of mystery, I guess, or there seems to be, about what an introverted type is or an extroverted type is, and a lot of confusion over that. And I think she kind of summed that up quite well, or put it forth quite well. Because
Right.
I mean, people are going to overthink that kind of stuff anyway, really. But I think she kind of helped clear that kind of stuff up as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one of the things with me. I mean, first you had to understand that your first extroverted function is the thing that people are more likely going to notice. You
Right.
know, if you're an
Absolutely.
introvert, your dominant function isn't necessarily going to be noticed first.
Right.
You know, so I, got called a lot of things, that are more an extroverted feeling type. That's not the case, because and then, hanging around with a lot of INTPs, INTJs, and being in a computer field, they go, oh, you're too much of a T to ever be a F type. I mean, I didn't care,
Right.
but it was confusing. It's like, oh, well, maybe that's right. Let's just read into it more.
Right.
Better identify. And then I'd hang around with people with different types because I found it interesting. It's like, what makes an ENFP? Let's hang around with those types and let's see. And
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yeah, well, I would target them. They would never know, but it would be like, oh right, okay, let's talk to this person. This person is supposed to be an ENFP, and well, this person everyone says is a stereotypical ENFP. There's no way he could be any other type. So let's talk to them and find out, what the key identifying traits are. How they act, how they behave, and I mean, I would still, I wouldn't like go, okay, this is an object, let's analyze it. But I would like have, talk to them more and just kind of get an idea, is talk to them in general things, make jokes, you should do, still make friends with them. But I would also be like kind of taking it all in and going, oh, okay, so this kind of ENFP is more likely to do this or this or this.
Right.
And one thing that I found quite interesting is if you get a type that has because one thing that the MBTI doesn't really take into account is disorders
Right.
and different spectrums of autism, and because that has a very very large bearing as well. I knew ENTP that has ADHD. It's quite an intense individual, but like really funny, really goofy, and it was almost like an amplified version of an ENTP.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, so it's like this trait, this trait, this trait, this trait. Okay, I'll just look up ADHD. Okay, so they're more likely to have these kind of traits if they're ADHD. So I'll just subtract that from what I know of the ENTP, and that might give a better idea.
Oh, interesting.
But
Yeah. I I usually think of MBTI as just kind of one lens, if you will. I mean, it's sort of, and there are other lenses like I think Enneagram's a good lens, and you stack those up, and that gives you a better insight into somebody. And there are just so many different lenses that
but
can bring
they,
insight.
they don't all convert, do they? Like the
No,
MBTI with the Enneagram and the interaction style one, and the temperament and the MBTI does, and so does
right?
the interaction. But the Enneagram doesn't. I don't think. I think it's a
No,
separate one, more
right.
focused on fears, is it?
It's sort of like the Freudian versus MBTI, which is Jungian. So it's more focused on like the childhood upbringing, sort of, and it has a spiritual dimension. But that for me, I love that it complicates the model. It doesn't, you know
It
what
makes
I
sense.
mean?
Screw
Yeah,
clarity up obscurity.
and because I guess it does help account for differences in type. And like you said, there's so many things that matter. Upbringing, of course, matters. Culture matters. Personal experience. I mean, it is an infinitely complex puzzle, but that
Yeah,
doesn't. But that doesn't mean that MBTI doesn't, show us something, something
yeah.
important.
It doesn't mean that it's worthless by
Right.
any means.
Right.
I mean, that's what I found. I read into the MBTI quite a lot. Like and a long time, and then I mean, because people are saying it's a great model and people are using it for you know their self identity or how they're going to live their life, and I thought that was a bit extreme. But yeah, I was kind of looked into it a lot, and it's like, well, that doesn't really work. But I like this part, and I like this part of it. So I can kind of understand some of these bits, and I would take different parts of the model and kind of incorporate, because I've already got like my own way of kind of looking at people and kind of understanding people.
Right.
So I kind of added some parts of the MBTI to that. Just like if I look into the Enneagram more, I'd probably incorporate
Of
some
course.
parts as well. So, but I mean, they all seem to have their uses to certain degrees,
Right.
which is quite interesting. So it's all kind of worthwhile in certain regards. I just wouldn't live your life by it because you tend to get trapped in that kind of thought or that way of thinking, and then it's like, oh shit, I do actually need to live as well. I do
Right.
actually have,
Right.
to do my own stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's a bit of an end trap, isn't it?
It's
Really.
it's a trap because at one at one extreme you say well I can't let this chain me. On the other
Mhm.
hand, the more you know about something, the freer you are from it. I think, um, but maybe it is just a matter of balancing that out a little bit,
Well,
or
also, I think it's one thing that you should understand that it is just a model. It's not
yes,
a way
right,
of life. It's a tool.
right,
And you should only treat it as such.
right,
It can be helpful to help motivate people. To help understand certain patterns of behavior, and it definitely helps in as far as communication is concerned. But you shouldn't define everything by it.
right. Yeah. Well, so just like anything, it can become dominating, over dominating,
Oh,
sort of,
definitely.
yeah, taking
Yeah.
over. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's fair. I think most. I don't think I've ever met an intuitive who suggests otherwise, except for
Mm.
maybe. I know INTPs come up with these uh, sort of models where they say, if you fall into this, then you must be, XYZ type. But ultimately, it's really the usefulness you get out of it that matters. I mean, whether
Yeah.
it helps you with other people, or it's intellectual problem that you're trying to solve, or whatever it is. It only matters insofar as you're able to get some kind of use out of it, whether tangible or intangible.
With INTPs, though, they're more concerned about what is true as far
Right.
as what knowledge is concerned,
Yes.
right? So, they would want to categorize everything. It's like, oh, 16
Yeah.
boxes, let's
Right.
go, like, all this time, this time, and, but it won't work like that. I mean, I think with every person that I know, or like a great many people that I know that have got into the MBTI, they seem to go through um, very easily definable stages.
Hmm.
They'll first have like the discovery, and that'll be brilliant.
Right.
And they'll research. They'll almost become obsessed. They'll read everything, the description, the story about them, and
Right.
then they go into more detail, splitting up the eight functions, the orders of them. Whereas like NIFE, TI, SE, and the shadow functions, and then what that means, and then they'll try and look for the patterns of what means what to what function, if it's introverted or extroverted, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a second. you know it doesn't really work for this or this or this, but
Right.
maybe if I see it as this way, and then eventually it's like, well, you know this isn't helpful at all. I'm just going to carry on living my life. And then they kind of completely drop it and
Drop it.
see it
Right.
as useless, and it's a shame. I mean, well, it's a shame on both ends. They shouldn't be obsessed with it. It shouldn't take over your
Right.
life, but you also, you do still learn something from it.
Right.
And it can be quite useful. Just you shouldn't be to the point of obsession.
And well, it's maybe it's that sort of looking for the solution to everything. It's not that. It does have its limits, and I think sometimes when people discover those limits, they sort of turn on that all or nothing kind of thinking and say, well, it can't do this or that accurately, and therefore it doesn't help at all. Instead of saying, well, it's a tool. It's limited like any tool. You can't use a hammer as a rake. Well, I guess you could, but it's going to take you
It
forever.
wouldn't work very well. That's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's it's quite interesting if people. Well, I fallen kind of trapped to that as well, but it's quite interesting how people do that. It's
Right.
try and use things for things that it's not supposed to be used for. Yeah.
Right.
It's as I said, I guess that's kind of the fault of the N type. You get caught up in abstract so much that you lose sight of reality
Right.
sometimes.
For me, that's always been a problem, regardless of, that was before MBTI. I always found something that I was thinking about, and really what MBTI helped me do is understand why that is, that it was okay to be the way it was. I would put so much pressure on myself to try to be somebody else, to get out of my head, and I realized that I have to refresh myself in the ways that are specific to my type. So I need intuitive conversations. I need to have feeling interactions, and that doesn't mean that I can't get along with anybody else. But I just need those things to charge my batteries to be able to, deal with the rest of the things I have to deal with. So
That's quite interesting. So you was kind of raised, or you grew up in more of an environment where you felt that you had to almost conform to another way of thinking. I mean,
yeah.
that seems quite stressful.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
very, very stressful, and probably caused a lot of anxiety growing up. Um, because other people think you should be like this, so therefore you
Right.
think you should be like this, and it doesn't work out. But I mean, I don't think I had that. I didn't have that pressure to conform to other things. I'm just trying to think where the difference would lie.
Did
Uh,
you, if you have an accepting parent or an intuitive parent, it makes the world of difference in how
yeah, I was
this turns
raised
out.
by an INFP,
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
so yeah, there's a key difference there. Sorry, one of my parents is an INFP. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit and introvert at that. So I suppose that's a hell of a lot more helpful. An SJ type that's extroverted is pretty tough
Right.
to go with. I know there's certain types that I find it very difficult to converse with. I usually refer to them as the marketing type,
Right.
and it drives me absolutely insane. It's like, oh my god, why did you ramble on for like 3 pages when you could have just used one sentence?
Yeah.
What was the point? Yeah.
That's
It's like,
like a pretty typical intuitive reaction to a strong sensor, who's just
yeah.
like my mom's an
I just give the
ESFJ, so
gist. Just give me
yeah.
the gist.
What is
Yeah.
the point? It's like get to the point so I know, what the next thing is. But
Yep.
how they build or how she builds rapport or how she connects is through those details, by building
And through tradition,
up
I
to something.
imagine.
And
The
that too.
history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's for her. It's roles. Everybody has to. There's a role for everybody, and you have to play that role in a certain way, and
Yeah.
um, and that's the tough part. But
See, I,
yeah.
I think for me, I went into computers because it was something I was kind of naturally good at. I was quite intuitive when it comes to computers, and then I started to like the problem,
Hmm.
solving the problem, breaking it down, and understanding it, and it kind of went that way. And it was really good until I kind of got to the end of it. It's like, oh no, what do I do now?
Right.
So I'm gonna have to kind of go a different way, or just realize that there's other things that you can do. It's not all just about the problem with computers; it's what you can create with them. Because I
Right.
like creative aspects of things as well. Very, very much admire people that are artistic and that kind of stuff. Like any form of art, really, whereas it be like programming or like music, actual drawing,
Right.
any kind of creative pursuit. I really admire that kind of stuff. I guess
Yeah. Likewise.
so,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's quite interesting. But then you get people like ENTJs, very interesting people. They're very goal orientated, and I would never go directly at an ENTJ. There is no way I would ever win by a direct confrontation. I'm very aware of this, and I know that the only reason that I could do it is come it from a more oblique angle,
Right.
and I can outdo them through like subversion, I guess you'd call it. Than going directly at it because I know I'd be wrong. I
Right.
can't do like the direct conflict. I'm not very good with it. You know, I can diffuse, but I can't argue a point to the bitter end. I'm terrible at it.
Right.
Because I start seeing it from their point of view, and it's like, oh, they're kind of right. It's like, I won't change, but damn it, I can't argue my point very well now.
Right.
You know, it's um, it's really interesting. Yes, I mean, with the ENTJs, they're very good at using the resources they have available to them
Right.
as well,
Right.
and very independent. So that's already a weakness against ENTJs in a combat situation, you know, in an
Right.
argumented situation or whatever. So I'm quite well aware that I would never win in direct confrontation, but I can go like around it and come at it from a different angle,
Right.
and you know, it's quite interesting. Whereas I know there's types that I can easily kind of outdo in certain areas, you know. It's more awareness of the INFJ's weaknesses and strengths. You know, as soon as INFJs seem to become emotional, they are absolutely out of the fight. You know, they're just gonna lose. There's
Right.
no question about it, or it doesn't really seem to be in my case. It's just I have to remain logical and think ahead and always kind of detached in a certain way. Um, Maybe even rehearsed sometimes, you know, and you know, I'll be fine. But if I'm like going off the cuff, as it were, and arguing something that's quite emotionally heightened or whatever, I'm just going to lose
Mhm.
because I won't reply critically. I will reply with sentences that imply, you know, what I mean.
Right.
I always seem to spiral into a point. It takes ages to do that, you know. So everything goes with implications of things. There's a lot of subtlety to it and stuff, and it just doesn't work in an argument because you know it's more about critical thinking
Right.
and stating a way which stating what you want to say in a way that cannot be argued. I can't do that to save my life. But everything I say seems to have more of a personable um, way of putting it across. You know that it's sculptured, it's constructed for that specific person. You know, whatever it just as I said, it just never works. It's completely misinterpreted,
Right.
usually in a heated situation.
I usually,
I mean, do you find that?
yeah, I think even on the like the personality page's personal growth page, it talks about, you know, if you're angry, then it's time to walk away because you lose. I mean, you're
You
going
do.
to lose. You lose not only in the context of the argument, but you know you can damage your friendship. You're gonna, you know, maybe damage your own
But
whatever
that's the thing that I've
confidence.
noticed. Oh, like if I'm angry or whatever, it like I just because you see the people's insecurities,
Hmm.
like
You go for it.
what you might go for it,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't want to do that, so I should run the hell away. You know, you don't want to say something that you know will be quite difficult to ever, you know, brush over.
Right. Yeah,
You
I've
know,
done that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
It's always a temptation. I think it's not a temptation as long as your FE is
But
online.
that's
You
the
know.
first thing that comes to mind. If you
Yeah.
get to a point where you're really genuinely angry at a
Exactly.
person and you want to hurt them, you know, that will instantly come to mind. You already know that person on a deeper level,
Yeah.
you know, and you know what would hurt them. And it's like, yeah, but I don't want to do that, you
Right.
know, but it comes to mind straight away. You know?
I think it was an NT. I can't remember if it was. I think maybe it was an ENTP that said, "There's nobody who can wound a person as deeply as an NF, particularly an INFJ,
I don't
because
know. I think an ENTP can do quite well.
really, I
Yeah,
don't
have you
know.
ever seen an upset ENTP? They're savage, man. They're like they're almost like a child in how they can
Right.
be very vicious and like they really go for it, you know. So I mean that can usually upset. I mean they tend to
Hmm.
get in a bit of trouble with that as well. You know, they have social problems because you know when they are upset, they're completely focused on tearing the other person apart. You know, it's
But there's something about the
takes time.
precision with which INFJs do it. Like, I've been around some mad, I would just say mad P types in general. It's like, you know, they just start throwing everything at you, including the kitchen sink. It's sort of a, you know, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of situation. But that doesn't really hurt as much as when somebody, you know, takes that knowledge they have of who
Takes
you
that
are,
trust as
that
well,
trust, and just
which is seen as off limits and uses it.
yes,
Yeah,
right? With
yeah,
precision, you know. Here are the 5 things I know that are going to hurt you. Let me hurt you with them all 5 in a row right now. You know, that's kind of kind of how what we're sometimes tempted to do when we get pushed beyond, our limits. Which I know
but
exactly what
then
you're talking
are we now saying how formidable the INFJ is? Just like a warning sign to other people, they don't mess with us, like from
about.
some sort of insecurity or like concern.
I think for me, it's not that. It's not sort of like I
Because
can hurt if you hurt
kind
me,
of
I'm gonna
get that
hurt
with
you.
the you kind of get that with the MBTI, the different types or whatever.
Right,
It's like this is my strength, this is my weakness. Like
right,
you see it with INFPs, for example. They're very unique, and they crave their uniqueness, and they resonated very strongly with their description, about being genuine because it's all nice, really nice things. Same with the INFJ. It's nice to think that you have like this psychic ability or whatever. It
right.
might be absolutely ridiculous, but it's nice to say it with INTPs. It's nice to know that a lot of them pride themselves on being very complex and very intelligent individuals. It might not necessarily be the case, but it's kind of, they hang themselves on it.
Right.
It's almost like if you say what your MBTI type is, you're revealing your
Yeah.
weaknesses.
Right.
Because, like, if you're an INTP, you're priding yourself on the fact that you're complex and you're intelligent, and that's kind of like painting a bullseye right on your back to start.
I and
But I
it.
think it's
Yeah.
weird that people like to um, almost kind of make themselves out to be more formidable because they are of this type. Like
Hmm.
no one likes a weakness, I guess. So they like brushing over. Like, every type seems to like that.
See, but I think of that tendency as a weakness because I mean the thing I
Yeah.
never want to do is to hurt somebody on purpose. That's to me that's really
But you'd like the option to be able to do it.
no to hurt
I mean,
somebody.
you wouldn't want to be a pushover. I mean, you would
I see
like,
what you're saying.
you
Yeah.
don't want to, you're not opening up yourself to vulnerabilities. You wouldn't
Right.
like to do that, but you would like to say that you would never want to do it. Having said that, it could happen if you push me too much.
Right. Well, it's more of a sort of a. I think once you push past somebody's defenses, you do get a beast-like response. Whatever that response is like, I think differs from person to person. But um, you know, T types. What's interesting is sometimes the more thinking type gets more emotional. They get more emotional as they get more stressed. Whereas the feeling person gets more cold and distant as they get more stressed, and so you get this collision. And I've certainly seen that play out.
Upset INFPs are a scary thing.
Yeah, yeah, and but once you push,
They go ballistic.
once you go past
Usually,
that, once you go past that, if they get cold, I think that's even worse because at that point they've stopped caring altogether, right? I
yeah,
mean
they've
that's
disregarded you as a person.
right. Yeah,
That's it.
and
And you're now an object. Or no, actually, with INFPs, it's you're now an aggressor.
you're an
You're
aggressor,
a person that's always going to attack me, so I'm going to perceive you as that.
right?
With INFJs, it seems to be like, I don't care about you because I no longer see you as a person. You know,
Hmm.
I don't even really accept you. I'm just going to respond to you, but I don't care. I don't have that interest to find out more about you. I don't have
Well,
that
that's true.
drive.
Yes, that's
I'm
true.
just completely disregarding you now. You go about your thing. It's like, I guess that kind of touches on the popular thing, which is the INFJ door
Door
slam.
slam, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that seems to be the thing. I have no interest in you anymore. You know, there's no connection, no tie. I would just, I might respond to you, but I don't care. Just it's just complete isolation almost from that person. It's like
Yeah,
all that energy that you put forward to understand that person. It's like, well, not anymore. That's it.
right.
Move on. I think that scares a lot of people as well. To have that, that's such a connection, and then all of a sudden for that to completely disappear somehow. It's like, what the hell just happened?
Right. Yeah, I can understand. And if that makes sense, I mean, just like you don't want to put your money in the bank, with the chance that, at some point it could all just disappear overnight. So when
Yeah.
people are investing time in a relationship, I think that's fair to be afraid of. But
I think that's kind of a similar thing with INFJs, that they're afraid of that, of putting so much
yep,
energy into it and for that to suddenly disappear. I guess that's why they they have that motivation of understanding people. It's to keep that connection alive,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
to be important to that person so they can still, you know, rely on it in some regard.
I think one of the important lessons, though, for I don't know if it's just INFJs, but it's that some relationships are meant to be, ephemeral or short term, and
Yep.
sometimes we chase relationships that
Oh,
aren't.
to the bitter, like dog with a bone, just will
Yes,
never let go or whatever.
yes,
It's like just let go,
let
move
it go.
on, you know, kind of
Yeah,
thing. So yeah,
I mean, I've even on Facebook when I first found it, I was so excited. I found all these people from my past, and it was like, for the most part, the, it didn't matter. It was way more exciting for me than for them. They're like, you're just
yeah,
somebody from my past,
yeah.
and it,
Well, different types have a way of, or different people, or they have a different way of looking at friendships. Some of them, it's like, well, if you haven't talked to me for a week or a month,
right,
then you know you're not actually that important to me anymore. You
right,
know,
right,
whereas some people like just see once they're a friend, that's it. You know,
yeah,
they are a friend. You know, it's definitely like a time element with some types,
right,
which is quite
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I guess I have that weird mix of feeling where I do feel like once a friend, always a friend, but at the same time, I
But then
do.
saying that,
Yeah,
you know, the idea of that person, they're still a friend. But
right.
then you meet up and you don't get on. It's like, oh, never mind. Well, it's a nice idea. You know?
Right. Right. The reality kicks. I mean, one of my very good friends from when I was growing up, we sort of reconnected. He even like found me through a weird way, like through a website. You know, it's like searching for me in particular. And when we talked on the phone, and it was that connection was tenuous.
Still,
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't, and it was not because neither one of us did want it. We both wanted to like reconnect, and we just couldn't anymore.
yeah,
So it was kind of that's frustrating and kind of sad.
yeah. I had that with ISFP friend of mine,
Okay,
uh, but we didn't really know each other to start off with.
okay,
And we started talking to each other, and we could both tell that the other one was very interested and wanted to talk to the other person, but we couldn't understand each other's
yeah,
communication style
yeah,
to save our lives. Like she looked at what I said, and there was lots of implications of words that weren't there. There was lots of spiraling into a point that never arose, you know. And she was like, "There's definitely something here. I can understand. I see the words. I can understand each individual word, and it's definitely a sentence, you know, but I can't understand what he's saying."
right,
Whereas I was looking at what she was saying, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, she's saying that, but what's behind it? You know, where's the motivation? What's she trying to get at without saying? You know?" And there was nothing there. What
right,
she said was exactly what she meant.
right,
Whereas for me, it was the complete opposite. And the only reason that we kind of bonded and got to know each other really well is through the fact that we were so irritated that we couldn't understand the other person. It was just very bizarre, you know, and that was kind of our motivation. We got talking to each other. When that finally, when the penny dropped in that regard, it was like, oh my God, that totally makes sense now, you know, because I was so used to communicating with intuitive types, and she was so used to talking
yep,
to S types. It was
yes,
just, it was like, oh my God, you know, that actually makes sense. Actually, hold on, your girlfriend or wife is ISTJ?
yes, correct.
Or S type. So I guess you had a similar thing in communication styles, like a difficulty there, maybe. Or
Oh,
do you find this?
definitely.
I should pose that in a form of a question. Do you find that you usually have, you may have, not usually, that's implying something else. Do you usually find that, like, do you find that you have difficulties communicating sometimes?
Yeah, I
Given
think
that it's TJ and you're INFJ,
INFJ.
is it?
Yeah, I mean one thing is the name for it is the dynamic opposite personality type. If you look at the if you look at the way the function if you look at all eight in an INFJ and all eight in an ISTJ, they're functionally opposite from each other. So
Mm.
um, I I appreciate lots of things about sensing, but I can't. It's my weakest function. With her, she
Mm.
appreciates a lot of things about intuition, but it's her weakest function. So We come to the
So
table.
your aspirational
Yes,
functions are the other's strengths.
that's right.
Is
And
it? Yeah.
for a long time that did seem to work, but eventually I think we the more we talked, the more we understood that we really had to be careful. We really had to clarify and seek
Hmm.
clarification in order to avoid inevitable misunderstandings, because
Yeah.
it's really true that we'd be using the same words, be talking
Hmm.
about the same thing, and yet she means something different and has a different objective than I do.
Yeah.
And so that's the frustrating part
And
of it.
imagine with her, it's like, yeah, but where's the real world purpose there? You know, what's the
It's
point of
always
it?
what
You
she's
know,
thinking. Yeah,
that's it. And you're more, oh, the meaning behind it, or like, see what could go wrong, or the patterns in something, maybe. With
it's
the people orientation, it's not necessarily the practice; it's the principle.
that's exactly right, and it's also about sort of for ICJs, they want an expectation. Tell me what your expectation is, and then either I can meet it or not, and then that's what a relationship is. Versus an INFJ who's like, no, a relationship sort of this constant give and take, compromise, trying to understand each other. We just come at things from opposite directions, and that doesn't mean
Yeah,
that we don't get a lot accomplished. We don't get along for the most part, but when we don't get along, it's usually because of those kinds of
communication.
differences. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
it's a communication difference usually.
Also, isn't there another thing I imagine with the ISTJ, showing how much you care would be doing the day-to-day routine tasks, saying that you'll do something and actually do it. It's the physical action of manipulating the external world
Right.
for the other person. Whereas INFJ, it's not going to be something like that. It'll be the intention, what you meant by doing
Right.
something. So that means that you might see malice when it's not necessarily the case. It's
Right.
just the other person didn't see it as that.
And for those kind of problems, what I did find that the five love languages tool really helped me sort of understand that really she was asking for all of those things. Like she likes encouragement, but she doesn't like to
Yeah.
give encouragement, which is I guess pretty typical of ISTJs. INFJs like give plenty of encouragement, but we don't always take care of all the day to day realities. So
Yeah.
we're kind of expecting each other to not only do what we naturally do, but also to do what the other person would do. And so it's sort of we're sort of unfairly, I think, expecting more of the other person than we can even deliver ourselves. Most people cannot competently use all five love languages, and I, and unlike MBTI, I think that everybody can learn how to at least get a competent use of all five functions, regardless of type, all five love languages, regardless of your personality type.
Hmm.
Um, while at the same time, understand like gift giving. Um, it takes a lot of work for me to understand how somebody finds getting a gift as significant as I find hearing words of affirmation. You know,
Hmm.
but it's possible. I mean, I just have to process it up here instead of just going with my natural reaction to those kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. That's that's quite interesting. I mean, and some people value, like, for as far as gift giving is concerned, sometimes people prefer, how much it resonates with them, or like the intent, like how much
Right.
trouble this person went through to make it specially for them. And
Right.
then some people, it doesn't matter, if it's expensive, that meant a lot,
Right.
You know?
Right.
Or sometimes it's like with a service, like they planned a holiday or something like that. They went through a lot of time, put a lot of time and effort into doing this for them. And then
Right.
sometimes it's just routinely doing the little things like the
Right.
chores or whatever for that person as part of maintaining the lifestyle.
Right.
It's very it's for opposing types. That's quite amusing from my point of view. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that would be quite difficult.
Um,
But again, rewarding. I mean, two opposite types. Also, I've noticed INFJs, when they bat for someone, they really go for it.
Hmm.
They're quite protective of people that, you know. I mean, if that other person's wrong, it's like, okay, I'm not doing anything. You're
Right.
wrong. You know,
Right.
but you know, if they defending the person, they really do actually go for it, which is quite interesting. Whereas INFJ just seems to go into dispute resolution mode.
Right.
We can resolve this, surely, you know, so it's good for both sides. Whereas the other person's expecting you to defend them, maybe.
Right. Yeah. The defending thing is something I I got a dose of early on because my mom's like that.
Hmm.
Was, she was always like, "Why didn't you defend me?" You know, when somebody said, "I'm like, defend you," that doesn't even cross my mind to.
It's a
Def-
conversation, you
it's
know.
a conversation. Yeah. I mean, so, but I realize now that the superficial image, you know, of somebody, if they're sensitive, particularly in I guess in ESJ, because both of them are very into role orientations. That's an attack on them, all of them. You
Yeah,
know,
it's it's more the appearance of this person that's supposed to be the part of the family unit, not defending, not being there, and
right,
having that other person's back, regardless if they're right or wrong.
right. I remember there's this Greek. I don't remember even what it's called. It was a Greek tale where the bad guy comes in and he says to the wife who's alone, the wife, not his wife, somebody else's wife, you know, either you sleep with me or I'm going to, you know, kill you and make it look like you were sleeping with one of the servants, like kill a servant and like have it look like a suicide pact or something. And she, so she opts to actually sleep with him and then get her
Hmm.
revenge because it was more important to her to not be seen as unfaithful, even if she wasn't,
Yeah.
than actually being unfaithful and nobody knowing about it, and then her being able to get her revenge in her way. That really never computed for me until
A lot of those
MB,
Greek stories have
MBTI.
revenge as
Yeah,
being
of
a general
course.
plot.
Right.
But yeah, no, I understand
Yeah.
what you mean. Yeah, yeah. You just like because one of my exes, someone said something mean to them, and I didn't, you know, I more just understood. Well, they didn't actually. It wasn't intentionally mean, but
Right.
it came. She perceived it as such, and I went, "Oh, actually, this person meant this and this, and this person actually meant this and this." So, you know, really, you're both kind of right, but you know, this is where the conflict happened. And she was like, "Why didn't you take my side?" I was like,
Yeah.
"What do you
Right.
mean take your side?" You know,
Right.
I was just trying to, you know, help both of you understand that it was more just a misconception, which is like, what are you talking about? You know, you should take my side. It's like, but it's not a fight; it's a conversation. You know, I
Right.
don't understand what are you on about? What is this a big issue? Small? I don't. You know, where
Right.
does this scale? You know, is this a big thing? All right, okay, so I should do that in the future then. All right, okay then.
Right.
Fair enough. Could you give me a hint when I'm supposed to do that? Like, like put a red flag behind your back or something.
Right.
So you notice certain hand signals.
Yeah. And it's not always fair. I know that sometimes, even or growing up with my mom would do that to me. To me, it looked to me like she was starting the fight. Like she would criticize somebody for something they did, from her
Yes.
perspective, and then they would,
Yep.
you know, then they would get mad and say something, and then she wants me to jump in, and it's like,
It's like, but it is your fault. To
yeah,
be
you
fair.
started
Oh,
it.
that's a mistake. I'm just saying right now, that's a mistake. It's like, to be fair, it was
Right.
kind of your fault. No, it wasn't.
Never say
No,
that.
no, it's now your fault
Right.
for making that mistake just now. But
Right.
yeah, that sucks. It's like, hang on a sec, because then you're like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
You know, it's like, hold on a second, I'm just gonna write this down. Okay, so it started like this. Where did I suddenly become the bad guy here?
Right. Yeah, and I've ended up there like so often until I finally figured out, well, thanks to MBTI, sort of what the problem was. It's really because they're not interested in resolving it. It's more
Yep,
about the reaction. Yeah.
yep. And what I did was I turned it into a joke. Like, oh wait a minute, hold on a second, sorry, am I supposed to, is it, you know, is this my part, you know, am I in the wrong, am I the bad guy here? Okay, okay, then I'll step in and go, you know, I don't like you at all. I don't think you're worthwhile to society, except like in using other words or whatever. Right, is that right? Yep. Okay. Yep. There you go. I can joke with it. And like if someone went, he went, "Am I the bad guy here?" It's like, "Yep. Okay. Should we go for ice cream first?" Be like, so that would be like the bridging the gap.
Right.
Both sides are getting heated. With me and the ex, and it's like, okay, ice cream time. We're out there, settle down. Okay, what just happened?
Right.
I need to understand.
Yeah.
So that actually kind of worked really well. Having that like neutral moment, someone call it. but, that was fraught with social danger, conversational danger.
Yep.
That's pretty funny.
Well,
But
I.
a lot of
Go ahead.
other MBTIs have those. Like one thing that I found with ENFPs, it's astounding how they fall madly in love with people, and it's the idea of that person as well.
Right.
They become very glorified, although they won't see it as that because they can say, "Oh, that's because they're really smart." Well, they're very creative. It's an incredible thing, and they've done this before and they've done that, and it's like, wow, how can you feel that intensely over someone in such short a period of time?
Right.
I find that I'm almost jealous, honestly, of that kind of ability to do that. I mean, it also means that they're in for a lot of hurt,
Right.
a lot of hurt down the line, but it's also an incredible thing as well. Very, very impressive.
Right. Yeah. That, I
So,
mean, and I have noticed that even amongst, even in this group, I know that for me, sometimes I do feel rapport automatically with certain people. Usually they're
yeah,
INFJs. Other
yeah,
times it takes, it takes months maybe before I really sort of feel like there's enough consistency in that person for me to, feel safe, I guess, around. And I'm sure that's more me than them. It's just
well,
the
have
way
you
I
noticed that you
see.
have people that you can really click with at a deeper level, and you get people that you can really click with at a jokey kind of
Yeah.
level, and then you get other people that you just can't, you don't care to. Like there's
Right.
one guy that I met, never met him before. First impression, I just thought to myself, this has got to be the most detestable human being on the planet. He was either like an ESTJ or an ENTJ,
Hmm.
and he was into finance and like buying and selling and stuff. And I was like, oh my god, this guy, can't stand him. But then like I got talking to him, and it wasn't anything that he didn't mean. He just didn't really get the social subtleties, or just didn't care for them because
Yeah.
the point, the end justified the means.
Right.
And it was just amusing. So just like wandered in and just like, yeah, can we go? Like no concern for social etiquette or anything like
Right.
that. It's like the most confrontational, anger-inspiring person. Like, oh my god, I can't stand you. But he was actually like a really nice guy. He just had to get over that initial problem. And
Right.
I've had that with ESTJs. Kind of scare me in a way. They're just they're like mini adults when they're kids. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
There's one kid that I know that's an ESTJ. God, a scary kid. He in primary school he started a raffle. He saw this on a TV show, and he started his own raffle. The prize was like a couple of sweets. The price of each raffle ticket was like £1. They're kids, they'd have change for sweets or whatever.
Right.
Buy all these raffle tickets, and the end result is just a bag of Smarties or whatever.
Hmm.
Like when his parent found out, just like, oh my god, don't do that, like
Right.
returning all the money to all these kids. But he just didn't understand, and like that's just terrifying. A kid like and then a later one was they went to an attraction, and it was like you rent out these pedalos or whatever it was for an hour, and it costs this much, and it's like, oh, we don't have that much, because there's loads of us on us, we don't have that much on us. And so the kids said, well, why don't we have half an hour so all of us can go on it and pay, the price for half an hour instead of a full hour? I mean, it
Right.
wasn't a choice, but
Hmm.
it was the logical thing to do that allowed everyone to go on it because they had enough money for only some people to go on it,
Hmm.
you know, and it was a problem because everyone wanted to go on it together as a joint
Right.
activity. It was like, well, why don't we all go on it, but for half an hour instead of an hour? It's like,
Right.
yes, well, that a very good idea. Like that's
Right.
obvious. They're so logical, but you just wouldn't think of it. And this kid is like 7, 8. It's like what the hell? I would never have thought of that. I might have thought of it internally, but I would never have said it. And it's like, well, this makes sense to me.
Right.
It's very astounding. Like ENTJs, you can't really read. They don't seem to work in subtlety or what's underneath the underneath or any kind of way. They seem to things are references to past.
Right.
What has happened and the detailed orientation of what has happened. Um, there's not much of an abstract process going on there. It's very concrete, very exact. It's like, holy, it's like I wouldn't mess with you. Stay away. You're too accurate and like very in tune with reality for me. I'm just gonna, keep my distance.
It's interesting. I usually I don't use the only time I think that conflict is absolutely necessary is when I perceive somebody is being a bully. In other words, if you're moderately a bad person, I'm probably not going to care so much, or at least not do anything, But if I think you're a bad person and you're affecting people around you, that's when I usually go for it. And I'm not afraid.
So when you perceive them to be a threat to the social group or
It,
to a specific person,
I think
like when you be a danger,
the
not necessarily
assumption.
physical violence or
No, not violence. Yeah, I mean that's not it.
could be aggressive.
It's more
So,
like the assumption that some people bring to the table is, look, there's one pie and I get the biggest piece, or else nobody gets any. And
mhm.
when somebody like that comes with that attitude, it's like, no, I think you're the person we need to exclude so the rest of us can have a fairly fair piece of the pie, as it were. I think, in other words, we would the whole community or group would be getting along if not for you. So why are we putting up with you?
I would have gone with, okay, well, we can't do that because it's not fair on others, but I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll slice the pie equally and we'll give you the first piece. That's what I would probably go with. Kind of,
Right.
you know, but yeah, I know, I know what you mean. Whereas, see, I think I am, as far as contrast goes, I think I might be a little bit socially controlling in comparison to you, or socially insecure, or one of the two, because I need an idea of the person to start off with, and I'll be quiet in a group until I get more of an
Sure.
idea with said person. But I'll have that social facade, so I still joke around, still be like a really nice guy. Well, because I am, but I'll observe that person more until I get a better idea of them, and then I'll start up a conversation. But I like to have a reasonable, like a good idea of that person before I start interacting, I guess, because I don't
Right.
know where they're going to go, what their intent is or anything like that. And it's not like an endanger, like an aggressor to the group, because I don't have much of a group mentality. But it's what they could do to a specific person, almost, excuse me, or myself,
Right.
I guess. Not that I see an outsider as an aggressor, first of all, but if they're someone like an ESTJ, I'm more likely to be wary because I can see how much of a grasp they have on reality, how much they will follow through with what they're saying, and how quickly they can recall data, and things like
Right.
that. But,
Well, I do. I've met a few ENFJs now, and I can see why. In the at first when I saw the interaction style and
sorry,
thing,
ENFJ or INFJ, did you
no,
say?
ENFJ.
ENFJ, okay, yeah.
They're sort of listed as the leader of the group, and I've always found that uh, it's like how do you choose a leader, based on type? But I think I understand now, having met some of them, why that is, because it's true. I'm going to be able to respond to that kind of leadership, where I absolutely am put off by, if I think of the other leadership types, ESTJ, ENTJ, what am I missing? ESTP, yeah, all, or is that right? I think I'm mixing one of ENTJ, whatever. I just am put off by those other types, or ESFJ rather. I'm put off by all of those other types, but for whatever reason, just that the fact that I know that the motivation of an ENFJ, the motivation is good, and I can read it, that puts me at ease. It allows me to be able to sort of follow that lead. But I can't, when I'm looking at those other types for their motivation, um, it's not there in a way that I can read, and therefore I think I'm automatically in rebellion mode most of the time around those other types.
Yeah. I quite like ENFJs. I've only met one of them that I know of, or that I kind of have a good idea that they might have. And we worked very well together, like on assignments, extremely well, very supporting, and very like work together very well. And it's very strange as well for a person to be. They're quite flattering people to others.
Hmm.
You know, they will say something is nice. You know, they will tell you that and stuff. And it's not that I was first quite defensive because I thought, well, why are you making a point of that? You know, kind of overplaying it a bit or whatever. You know, what might they want? You know, was that? But
Right.
it's their way of interacting,
Right.
and it worked quite well. I mean, well, saying that, the ENFJ that I'm talking about was a guy, so he wasn't actually very much like that, but he was still, you know, you got a very good idea that he was would very much have your back, and that kind of thing in a situation. We actually complemented each other very well because I was very good at the project that we were doing, and I was quite bright, and he didn't quite get it. You know, he was a slower learner, not because he wasn't intelligent, but because his intelligence laid elsewhere.
Right.
You know, and so what would happen, because he knew my failing was my focus, and I get distracted by people. He would kind of use that, and like one instance. He said, "Oh, I'm really struggling with this. You know, really got a problem with this assignment." And you know, he did a couple of lines or whatever, and you know, I helped him out. You know, I said, "You know, I won't do it for you, but I'll help you. You know, do the skeleton, and then fill it out, and I did it more and more and more." And it was sorted. And I hadn't done mine, and then come the hand-in day, you know, I had mine. Bearing in mind this was like the next day or the next morning, and I hadn't really done a very good job with mine. And he went, "Yep, here's yours." And this is my
Wow.
other one that I did previously. You know, so he had faked the struggling and stuff like that to get my attention to it because he knew that I tutored people very well, and also that I would always help out a mate.
Right.
Like priority wise, it would always be the other person instead of me. I wouldn't really
Right.
care because in my head, if I could do it, if I knew I could do it, that's fine. You know, if I knew I struggled, then I'd really work hard. But you know,
Right.
the assignment was really quite easy. And yeah, he went, well, yep, that's your assignment. I went, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I didn't fall for that one again, but it just made me laugh so much that he got that idea. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you got me.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I mean, it's interesting that ESFJs and ENFJs, I mean, they're very similar in certain ways, but that whatever it is about ENFJs, I can tell that that they do care about me as a person. Whereas with an ESFJ, it's more like, are your needs met? You know, if your needs are met, then you're good. You know, be on your way, kind of thing. But but they, the deeper needs or the personal growth aspect, I think is missing there. Whereas with ENFJs, I think at least understand that they understand that about probably all they understand that about NFs is that we have that's has to be part of our agenda if we're going to be fulfilled, in life. So,
that
but
makes sense.
that's a funny story. I'm doing what you do to your ENFP friend. I thought it was really funny. I didn't say anything.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, that's fine. I did understand that you found that
Okay.
very funny. It's just,
Okay.
I also noticed you have the Simpsons in the back there.
I do. Yeah.
Oh, what are the others?
One is a picture of Bruce Campbell. He did the Evil Dead
Uh,
series. I love
yes, he
that guy.
did. Yeah, yeah.
And Captain Janeway from Star Trek is the other one up there.
Okay, and what's the one next to Campbell?
That's Bugs Bunny up there. One of my all-time, favorite. I don't know if you call him a hero, maybe anti-hero or something like that. I don't know.
Anti-hero or hero? I mean, that's a conversation. It's more just a rabbit that just wants to carry on living his life, but keeps getting interrupted and deals with it appropriately, or
Yeah,
not so much.
right. But it's sort of like he uses that as an, these intrusions as an excuse to, like, totally go to war
he,
with
he's the
somebody.
hero of circumstance. Like,
Yes.
that's quite funny. And also, I noticed you have a lot of organizational stuff. How much of that do you actually use? Because I have whiteboards too as well, and I like the idea of being organized. I like the idea of having these whiteboards and mapping out stuff. But I notice that as soon as I write something down, I won't remember it. I'm very organized internally in my head,
Right.
but I can't do that kind of stuff externally. Like, plot it out to save my life. I mean, you've got is that calendar version of a whiteboard and a
Yes.
normal plain whiteboard. I've got exactly the same.
Okay. The calendar actually works very well. I've learned that when it comes to electronic technology, I'm just not good with it. I don't remember it, and having just this whiteboard where I can just write it and then erase it seems to work really well. The blank whiteboard doesn't work as well. I found that I do these lists, and nothing ever the lists never
Yep.
get 100% completed, and so I end up transferring. You know,
And then you look up advice, and people go to, well, just list a couple of things that you can do easily,
right.
and you'll get in a routine. Then you'll get through the list. It's like, no, I'll just do the easy ones, and then that'll be it.
Yeah. Right.
Not that you lose interest. You'll do those easy ones because they're quick and easy, and then you'll forget to carry on with the thing, or you get distracted, or whatever. I think
Right.
I moved house after my first year of university. I found 14 notepads. Each of them had a few, like 5, 6 pages used, that had to-do lists. Each of them had like the first few that were crossed out, and you still had a couple.
Right.
It's like, damn it.
I've learned that that's not a bad thing. I At one point I had somebody diagnosed me with ADD, which it turns out that's not what the problem was. But I during that time I still learned a lot about organization, because it was like,
Mhm.
well, how I do have these organizational problems, and studying that really helped. And one of the pieces of advice is you don't have to be obsessively organized. You can be
Yeah,
organized enough. So that's what I
yeah,
try to think of, is like, it doesn't have to be perfect,
yeah.
just enough to help me get by. And if not everything on the list gets done, who cares? Life goes on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
See, I didn't learn that for a while, and I was like, okay, well, I'll be organized, and I'll have everything.
right.
This will be my day, and it's to a time, and I'll set
Yeah.
alarms for every single bit, so I know to switch to the next one. And that didn't work. If anything, I did the complete opposite. As far as I wouldn't work to it, they'd be like, okay, well, I haven't finished this yet, so I should really finish this before the next one, and then more alarms go off. Like, it doesn't work. And I'll try and work with a person. That didn't work because I was more concentrating on the person.
Right. Right.
And it was just insane. But like, to use organization to a point where it's helpful and not more is definitely good for me. I mean, I've got a calendar on my phone. I like, before, I had one of those really old second generation phones, and yeah, I barely used it. This has a calendar on it. It's like a lifeline. I know that's sad to say, but I use it, and and it really helps me because I will get distracted and I'll completely forget what I'm supposed to do the next
Right.
day. But all I have to do is just look at my calendar the night before, and then I've memorized everything that's going to go on the next day and what times I should be things, or I get a sense of something impending that will happen, and I'll check it. But otherwise, I'll just naturally just seem to forget, or get distracted or whatever, and I just completely blank this, whatever I was supposed to be there for,
Right.
at a specific time. It's really strange. And then you got these people that, like, they have these complex charts and they can stick to it. It's like, darn it,
No.
maybe I want to be like that, in some regard. And it's like, well, no, actually, that's quite tedious.
Yeah.
Try to, and those types of people, they tend to be very good with external organization, but they don't have the internal organization.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, and
Whereas,
that's ISTJ, by the way. That's how my wife is. She she not only, her job is essentially not only to plan everything for herself, but
mhm,
for all these other people as well, and she's able to do it down, and she gets all the details totally straight. And I think that's the reason SC is down there as our inferior. I think is because we would so much love to be able to do that,
yeah,
but you have to realize, I mean, or at least I've learned to realize that my strength is the NI part, is the
Mhm.
vision part. And the more
Yep,
you
and the
concentrate on
TI
the
as well.
details, and the TI, and the more you
Yep,
concentrate on the details, the more you lose the big picture, the more you lose the vision.
yep,
So, yeah,
yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, as soon as I wrote something down, I would know that it would be on that board.
yeah,
I won't know what was on that board, but I would
right.
know exactly that it was there.
That's why I wrote it
Just
down. That's what I didn't have
yeah,
to remember.
exactly. Yeah, that was the whole point. But in like things like I was a bit more messy when I was in the first year of university, which I think is generally the case. But I would have paperwork absolutely everywhere, but I could tell you exactly where everything was. Like externally, it was completely a mess. Internally, I knew it,
Right,
where I put it last because I remember seeing myself putting it there last.
right,
Like and when I lost something, I really hate losing keys because I remember every single place I put those keys,
yep,
and but I don't know which was the latest. I seem to be terrible with time in regards to filtering
right.
which image is the right one. I know it was there at one point. I know it was there at one point, but I'm not sure which one was the last point where I placed it. Oh, it's
Right,
so aggravating. It's like I have to rewind and play it through
right.
in my head to do it. So,
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I have the same sort. I guess I read somewhere, I don't even remember where now, but that INFJs tend, because of that inferior SC, we relive things. Like even if we're in our memory trying to remember how some things go, sometimes it's even like we're sort of almost twitching, like reenacting it, because it's not SI. SI is that sort of it's constantly there, the comparison between what was yesterday and what was today, and so there's always this sort of marker of change. Whereas with SC, it's like the experience itself is there, but you have to like abandon now to access that
yeah.
memory.
Or the idea of future, like what you will be doing, because
Yes, right,
we're scheduling additional hours to work or whatever. My manager takes advantage of me in that I will not remember what I did last week or the week after, or what I'm going to do the next week. I won't have a clue.
hmm,
I might have an idea if someone told me, and kind of remember. Oh, I even remember. I won't. Like I know on that date, I'm going to do this. I can't do that. You know, well, actually, I won't remember on that date. I remember the activity, and then I will kind of remember the date. I think it's sometime around there, and it'll work from there. But I won't recall anything to save my life in regards to what I did the week before. In time,
right,
thing. I can barely remember conversations that I've just spoken about.
right.
I'll say something and they'll go, "What did you say?" I'm like, "Oh," and then I have to replay the conversation in my head. It's like, hold on a second, and like loading, playing through. Oh no, okay, there we go. We went to this, and then we went to that, and to that. And I remember the path that we followed,
Right.
but I have to go back through that to get to it because it makes sense, in my mind of what led to where. But it just takes so long.
Yeah.
And you get these people
That's
like perfect. It's like, yep, we did this at this time and this at this time. It's like, oh, shut up, go away.
yeah. I have the same issues, and even like when I go to my MBTI group, if my wife asks me what did you talk about, I was there for like 5 hours, and
Yeah, I can't
and
tell you.
what did we talk about? I don't know.
Yeah,
So she's sort of learning. I think that that's not purposeful. I really, if you ask me about a problem and there was something relevant in that conversation,
you can bring it up. Yep,
I'll be able to bring it up just like that. But
yep,
just to recall
yep.
without purpose or meaning or objective what was said in that meeting, it's very difficult for me to
And you're
do.
almost a little bit defensive because you're bad at this.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, hey, this
right,
isn't fair.
right,
Like, I'll go, okay, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I kind of talked about this and kind of talked about this and kind of talked about this. All right, okay. So you didn't do much then? Oh no, we did quite a lot,
right,
And they'll okay,
right,
but then they'll realize they have to ask something specific about this bit,
right.
and I can get that, I
Yeah,
can do that, but I have to again spiral in,
right.
you know. And also,
Yes,
it sounds like insanity because it's again we're conversing with topics that are kind of structured for that other person, and it's
right.
completely separate. So it's very, very difficult is like kind of bring it across the gist. It's like, so you talk to this person for hours, you're over there for hours. What did you talk about? Not much,
Not
just we
much.
did this, we did
Right.
that. Well, you did that for like 3 hours. It's like, well, yeah. So, but you have to kind of really push the thing, and then I might remember next time because it's like, oh, I might get quizzed by about this later.
Right.
You know,
And it is sort of. I've come to realize that they're not asking for an accounting, even though that's what it feels
I
like most of
know
the time.
it's like you're being interrogated because
Yeah.
I know I'm poor at it.
Yeah, and that's what
Like
it
my
is. It's
man.
my defensiveness. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and like my manager go, so what did you do last time you worked here? Did you forget anything? Like, no. And like, and stuff will be filled in, so I'll be like, oh, actually, I think this person worked then. Like, I'm not really sure. I don't have a clue, but I don't
Right.
think I made a mistake.
Right.
I can't remember myself making a mistake. I probably did because he's usually because that annoys me. He already knows that I did something wrong.
Right.
That I didn't fill something in, which is the entire reason why he brought up the point. So
Right.
he's coming in already prepared. It's not fair because I'm trying to recall something that I'm poor at doing anyway.
Right.
you know, it's
I've
not
even
an even kill.
I've even noticed that I'm not like with the garage door. I have garage door opener. I've noticed I will get 2 blocks away and be like, did I close the door?
Yeah,
And I don't remember. I don't have a memory of doing it, and I've
yeah.
just learned I have to trust
And when you
myself.
recall it, if you notice when we recall it, it's like, oh yeah, but that could have been this day, or that could have been this day. I don't
Exactly.
know. I remember it being closed at some point, and
At
this
some
point,
point,
and
it
this
was
point.
close.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
is that today, or I don't know. you know,
So I don't turn around and go back and check. I did sometimes used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. I just realize
you have to
I
trust
know
yourself.
I have to trust myself that I closed it when I left, and
It's like I wouldn't have done that. That's
what it is.
ridiculous.
Exactly. Right. And
But one thing I found out when I worked as an IT technician, um, I would routinely every day I would open up the first thing I do apart from put the kettle on. Stereotype, I know, but it works for me. And I would open up the BBC News, and I would go to the science pages and the technology pages and look at those, and I would know what day it is because of that. And I would know what date it is because of that,
right.
and that helped my memory so much because it would be like, oh, when did I, what did I do on that day? I'd have to recall the instance. It's like, okay, that was the activity. What was the thing on the BBC? What related
Oh,
links to that?
nice.
And
Yeah.
then it would work with the. But then that was a Wednesday, but it didn't feel like a long time ago, so it might have been this week. And then I'd like start to get it. But oh my god, it's like paint by numbers when I'm trying to remember something like that. It's terrible.
Right.
It's just so slow. It's like, come on, you can do it. It's like, not really. yeah.
I've I've learned to value because other people don't necessarily tell you what they value about you. I mean, I've learned to just value those things about myself that I know other people come and look for.
Yeah.
Like when they need somebody's advice or when they need somebody to listen to them or whatever, they come to me. So they don't tell me they value those things, and they may not value those things as much as what they bring to the table. But I've realized it is a trait. I mean, I I don't have their strengths, and they don't have my strengths, and so I'm not
But
going to
if
be
you didn't
them.
have the MBTI, it would be more like, oh, this person's good at memory. I'm crap at it.
Yeah,
You
right,
wouldn't think of it. Oh, well, this is like that type of person's more likely to have a better recall than
right,
I do. But then I'm good at this as well.
right,
Okay, I guess that's a security blanket in a way, isn't it? But it is one of those things. Like some people are just going to remember things far better
right,
than you, and just like you'll have strengths as well. But I don't like being that guy. The person that everyone would talk to help resolve the problems. Because I
right,
was that guy, and it drove me berserk. I lived with a load of uh, people that were quite interesting and very unique individuals, I'll say. Um, and I ended up like final year project stuff, really stressful. Wasn't getting along amazingly well with roommates. Very stressful situation to the point it sounds like fiction. It really did. I won't go into it, but it's insane. And I went upstairs, and there was a queue of people outside my door. I was like, why you queuing outside the door? And it's like, oh, we heard you're really good at talking through, these kind of problems and
Oh my
helping out.
gosh,
Yeah.
yeah,
I went, are you kidding me?
yeah,
And on my final year, because you could tell I had enough at that point, because I actually
yeah.
said, "Are you kidding me?" and actually said, "I'm at final year." It's like, I don't care about your problems. And then what am I kidding? Of course I kind of did, and then kind of went, "Okay, I'll give you about this many minutes," and of course I
Right.
don't. But it was like, "Are you kidding me?" It was ridiculous things some person's boyfriend that lived in another country. Um, they hadn't talked to them for a couple of days, and they're not sure if this mean that or this
Right,
and that.
right.
It's like, are you kidding me? It's like, oh my god. Yes, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. That's a serious problem. I mean, these children in Africa that are starving, they think they have problems, but clearly
Right.
they haven't been in the situation that you're in. It's
Right.
like, oh my god. It's like, I have problems that are far worse than that. And I'm not even looking, my smile isn't faltering. But you're coming across and absolutely devastated by this tiny thing. Are you joking? I didn't
Right.
say that. I wanted to say it. I should have said it on reflection because the whole thing was just completely surreal. But it's like, oh, why? Just insane people.
Right.
There are some crazy people out there. You see it on the news, no, you see it on those talk shows, and you think, wow, that's a crazy person. I've never met any person like that. It's like
But you
fictional.
have.
This
That's
happens to other people, so it happened to me. And then
right.
you get put in that situation, and you think, bugger.
Yeah.
It's like, oh dear. I used to try to diffuse the stress with humor. So much so that I was just like a comedian around my mates. I would make so many jokes about it. I was so stressed though, so incredibly stressed. I would go on long walks, and I wouldn't care where I went. I'd just walk in a direction that I knew that there was some really pretty scenery. I'd just keep on walking, and then I'd only stop walking when I was really hungry. I'd like, oh shit, I need something to eat, and I'd go walk back. And so this would be like walking for miles. It just helped just to get away with the problem because I automatically kind of take the social problems, conflicts, and try and to solve it. That would be my focus. And living in a place that was that stressful,
Right.
I couldn't really get away with it. So I would just make so many jokes when I was around my mates, and they didn't believe me because I was making these jokes, and they were thinking, "Yeah, he's making all this up." And then they came over, and they were like, "Damn." you know, I'll give you an instance. Near the end of my final year, I just had enough. I really had enough. I couldn't deal with these people anymore. And I was doing a 5 year project, very stressed, nearing the deadline. Went downstairs, and two of the roommates were holding knives at each other. They hated each other,
Hmm.
absolutely hated each other, and they were holding knives at each other. And I just opened the door because there was no window in the kitchen door as a fire. Opened it up and just looked at her and just went, looked at the one, looked at the other, and just sighed. And then just walked through the middle of them, turned the kettle on, and went back upstairs. I, I just couldn't be bothered anymore. I was like, if you're going to kill yourself, go for it. I can't be bothered anymore. This isn't my problem. Just get on with it. I reached a limit. I never
Yeah.
thought I had a limit, but I found it.
Yeah.
It's so surreal,
Yeah. I think
isn't it?
that happens to.
I was gonna
I
say,
think
how
that
do you deal
happens.
with that kind of stress? Because
I
everyone does with certain amounts of stress. I imagine are you similar in that regard or not really?
I usually don't. Do I throw my hands up? That's a good question. No, no. Actually, my mechanism. This is where the Enneagram has helped me. Is I tune out. I
Mm,
I withdraw. I may be still there, but I'm not there. And I've learned to turn that. I'm working on not doing that anymore. And just if I get over, if it's too much, I just have to. I just say this is too much, as nicely as I can, and get away. But even that causes conflicts, actually,
yes, yeah, yeah.
because like this conversation, I'm getting a lot out of. I mean, it's an intuitive conversation. When people are just venting their problems at you, I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm draining. I'm getting drained by that interaction, And
Yeah, if I noticed if
yeah,
it's a negatively emotionally charged the conversation, that is
right,
a drain to me.
right,
Otherwise if it's positively charged, I kind of like it.
right,
I do, I guess, get a little bit of a charge out of it, but if it extends for a long period of time, I start to get drained again.
right,
There's definitely different amounts of energy that you get zapped depending on how, what kind of thing it is.
right. So that's unfortunately that's what I tend to do when it starts to get too much. But I'm learning to just instead of withdrawing internally but still being present, I think I do the right thing and say I will just say this is great, but I need to recharge. I need to charge my batteries and leave. And if they get mad at that, then that's at that point it's not my problem. I'm there. I'm trying to help, but I need some help. Uh, with my energy to be able to help, to be able to stay and help them more later on. So, people
Yeah.
people have to learn that.
Yeah, because often if I'm not really sure how to deal with a person, I think of examples. Because you store behavioural patterns and stuff like that. I
Right.
think about that, and I kind of took the ENTJ approach. It's like if you do this and this and this will help your problem.
Right.
I will help you if you were receptive to my help.
Okay.
If my advice doesn't work for you, that's fine. I'll still try and help you in another way. But if you're just going to go on and on at me, well, no, actually, I won't say it like that, but I'll just say, but this kind of line of thinking, or if you only come to me, just to kind of nag or vent or whatever,
Right.
it's okay if you do that, but I can't do it all the time. Or,
Right.
and if they're being like completely belligerent or whatever, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Just go away.
Right.
There's nothing constructive about it. But if a person is willing to put the time in, I will definitely go stick my neck out in that regard. Whereas before, I wouldn't make that choice. I wouldn't put those terms and
I
agreements,
see.
on there. I would just be there, constantly throughout the hours of venting or whatever, and just be like, oh,
Yeah.
just kind of like trying not to be rude, but kind of glancing at your watch, going, "Come on, it's going to be close to dinner time. This person has to get hungry at some point."
Yeah.
So you
I
get alarmed whatever and say, "Oh, sorry, this person called me."
right. And because my mom's an ESFJ, she can talk for forever because she's charging while she's doing it. So I mean, literally,
Oh
we're on the
god,
phone 3.5, 4 hours. She's just talking, and I'm like, yeah,
you're
okay,
slowly losing the will to live.
yes, yes. And I've learned that in order, because the really I'm like, or initially I would think, well, I'm trying to be there for her, I'm trying to help her, but it was damaging the relationship because I didn't want to talk to her. When she called, I'm like, oh my god, it's my mom. I am not
Yeah,
answering this call. And now I've learned to just at 20 or 30 minutes, whenever I notice my attention is starting to wander, that it's
yeah,
time to just say, to excuse myself. And really, she doesn't even notice that much of the time. She's like, oh, okay, goodbye. And
yeah.
before I was putting
I
all this
think
stress on
you really
myself.
care. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you didn't want to end it because you wanted to make sure that you were there for that person.
Right.
You didn't
Right.
want to come across like you didn't care. Whatever. So you
Right.
stick it out, and it's like really they don't mind.
Right.
It's like, damn it!
Yeah. It didn't
What
even
that
matter.
ask?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's
and when she calls now, I don't. There's still a little bit of like, what is it going to be now? But for the most part, I don't feel that way. It's not like, oh, it's her. I'm dreading her calling. It's just
well
like,
because you have that choice.
right,
You have that
exactly,
escape, that exit, and it's not socially impolite.
exactly, yeah. I mean, I think it's helped our relationship, which is sort of the lesson of the peacemaker, the Enneagram 9 is to sort of assert yourself enough so that you're actually there for people. Instead of before, what I was doing is just, I wasn't really there. I was on the phone, but I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't pay attention
And
for
you
three
start to
hours.
become avoidant of that person
Yeah,
as well.
and exactly. And then I don't want to help them,
Yeah,
So it was sort of a self-destructive kind of behavioral pattern, which I've learned to start to break out of anyway.
yeah. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I've kind of been in those kind of situations as well. It's just like, and you end up going,
Yes.
yep,
Right.
I totally agree. Yep, yep,
Right.
yeah, kind of thing. I've done that before too. And, like, and they ask you a question, and you go, "Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, it might depend. I mean, what about this? You know, just try and get more
Right.
specifics." And it's like, "Oh, that was the question," and
Right.
then you answer it. And try and cover up that way.
Yeah, I think I've dreaded because she did this to me a couple of times, which is actually what. At first, I thought it was like really nasty of her to do, but I kind of understand what was going on. But she would say, "Well, did you hear what I just said? You know, what did I just say?" Like checking in with me on what she just said, and I realized that I couldn't repeat it. I didn't really know. I mean, uh, there's a sort of in order to listen empathically, I think is what they call it. The psychological term is. It it does require your attention, and that's why
Well,
it
you can
has to be
also
done in
you
short
can
bursts.
predict what people are saying though,
Right.
depending on the tone, like
Oh,
the
sure.
because like I'd be like that. I still hear the ups and downs of the voice or whatever, and you kind of get an idea. If you know, maybe get if I get the last word, I can piece it all together.
Right.
But yeah, you do need to kind of really concentrate if you want to be there in the conversation.
Right.
So I do completely understand that.
So I don't know. Yeah.
No, I found it quite interesting that you've got your, you know, quite funny actually that you've got your two whiteboards behind. You've got your poster things at the top as well. Noticed that there is another person that's supposed to be an INFJ who does these kind of things. Is it there's a lady that does it. It does a lot of these interaction videos. I'm just trying to
Yuma
think what
Scepter?
that's it.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
one. And that amused as well. I think she also had a whiteboard and stuff. And actually amused me
Oh.
because I looked at the back. I was like really paying attention, like trying to read what the words it was. And she had, I think it's Kahlil Gibran, um, the Forerunner. I was like, I've got that book, you know. I was like, so I was like going, oh, INFJs are really rare, you know, trying to understand and like trying to get in contact with someone and trying to get a better idea. Um, and, you know, whether it's for self-reflection or not, you know, just to
Right.
get an idea of the person. And I was like, okay, so what do I read into this, you know? And like, so I listened to the conversation, but I was like trying to note things that are in the background as well. But because I think a lot of ENFPs they tend to have things like The Simpsons in the back and stuff like that. And in TPs they tend to have Rubik's cubes. Many of them own a Rubik's cubes, or they're like brilliant at a specific set of things. Whether it be piano, they'll be brilliant at, or like I know there's another one that has this static juggling, and it's like all like it'll make it appear that it's constant, the ball's constantly moving as it goes around the body
All
and
right.
like that kind of stuff. So it was actually quite interesting to watch. Um, but yeah, so I was wondering what the INFJ version of that was, because you know ENTPs also have like strange noises on their. They always have funny ringtones or alerts that gets everyone's attention. They'd be
Right.
absolutely ridiculous, like a C3PO's kind of noise. Oh, it's like that. Yeah.
I
It's quite funny.
I noticed one thing. This is most of the INFJs I know are within my age range, or close, sort of in their late 20s or mid 30s, or maybe a little bit, or maybe into their 40s a little bit. But we all seem to really love just reading when we were young. I mean, especially in college. I still have a huge bookcase full of books out there, but over time we seem to sort of lose ourselves, or get away from that and into trying to do less reading and more doing over time. So part of what you're noticing too, I think, is just the progression over time of how that works. And if you've ever been to the Personality Junkie site, I think that's the one that talks a bit about how we change, or how INFJs tend to, of course, not everyone, but tend to change over time.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I know with INTPs, they tend to become more um, they tend to go for like the philosophical stuff and like find the more spiritual side to certain things.
Hmm.
A lot of them anyway. Whereas before they were very intellectually orientated, and
Right.
everything was an intellectual pursuit. They like to break things down. They used to struggle socially as a general pattern, and they would really love, like some of them fantasize of like being able to open people's heads and kind of seeing where everything works and then understanding that way and then closing it again and then having a conversation with them.
Right.
You know, so it's quite interesting. I mean, like as you said with the INFJ, what they read more as they get older, or like I think with INFJs, going by what my interactions with them, it's that they try and define like themselves better.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely true. Um,
Yeah,
I
because before it's other people with a focus, and it's
that's
kind of
that's really true. Um, Jung has an idea of the midlife crisis. It's different than I think is the Freudian whatever the typical view of the midlife crisis being really just a manifestation of a fear of death. So you try to reclaim your youth, in order to get around that. That's not what Jung means by that. He talks more about the sense of we're born with a certain psychological wiring, but when we're being brought up and we're being brought up by our parents and we're enculturated by our culture, that we subsume certain parts of our identity or our psychological wiring in order to accommodate those things. And once we hit midlife, that crisis can happen. I would say, anywhere from it can probably be even maybe in your late teenage years up to your 40s and beyond. But you fight to reclaim that sense of self, that your true psychological wiring. You cast off that accommodated self and claim your true self, or and it's a more painful process for some than others. For me, it was quite a large changeover. It won't be for everybody. I think you're blessed, and that anybody with an intuitive parent, who's an intuitive, is blessed in the sense that you didn't have to suppress that very important part about yourself, or at least most of the time, an intuitive parent is going to encourage that instead of suppressing it. Um, and and I think that INFJs, because and anybody maybe with FE in their stack, is going to succumb to that early pressure to be somebody other than ourselves, easier than somebody with FI. But that's why I think that's why we appear to other people to change so much. It's not really even that we're changing so much as we're allowing who we are on the inside to, show on the outside a lot more. Um, and that's definitely what I've done. And people who've even known me for just this, it's only been a year. It's not even been a year since I found MBTI. People who know me through that, who have known me through that process, are, dumbfounded, or maybe, or if they've been through that process before, they recognize, the huge change uh, in me and my behavior and in the way I think, just over that short amount of time as a result of this process.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like the biggest difficulty you had was almost self-acceptance, given
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
the main or your parental figures.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Uh,
it's not their fault, but yeah.
yeah, so that makes sense how that would help that much. I mean, I think Celebok had a certain similarity in that,
Mm,
because of his culture and parental expectations and things like that, and how he kind of had to take on those kind of attributes too, to gain acceptance, or you do become more like your parents in certain aspects, don't you? And you adopt their ideals as your own in
right.
certain regards. Not all, but some. And he kind of had that conflict as well. and he's had to struggle with that as well. And I think that the MBTI may have helped him in that regard as well. So yeah, it's quite interesting in that regard how how the MBTI in general can help people.
Right.
It's, it's quite interesting.
Well, actually, unfortunately, I'm really loving this conversation, but I just about need to leave to go to an appointment. But I wanted to give you maybe the last word if you want. We've been talking for quite a bit of time now.
3 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours, and I don't know what time is it now. There's like what is it 10:30 over there?
10:30. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. If I were you, I'd probably be starting to get tired by this amount of time. But I want to give you the last word on sort of maybe what's the best thing you think that MBTI has the potential to bring you in specific? Maybe the thing that you haven't quite, the thing that keeps you coming back to MBTI that you're hoping, to discover.
Well, honestly, like the Bible, the stories with that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I like the story and the identification of each of the groups, and I like to explore people in that kind of way. And NFs and NTs I never really had a problem with understanding or get along with. STs kind of difficult, and same with some of the other types, and so I guess a better understanding of how those types communicate. Because I'd be fine with NTs and stuff like that, but when it came to the more S types, there was a lot more communication issues, and it was quite difficult to understand because it was so foreign. I think.
Right.
I mean, I would get the idea, but when I tried to get to know them a lot better, there was a lot more communication issues. So I guess it helped in that regard, I think. And also, it's kind of interesting as well. It's an interesting thing to study and get to know and stuff. And also, I like psychology, so it's not a profession, but it's definitely interesting.
Right.
And people orientated, so it makes sense. So
Cool.
that would be it, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great last word. And it was a joy talking to you.
Same to you.
I'll hopefully we can do this again if you're not averse to it. Sometime in the future.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Talk to you later. All right. Good night.
Bye.